Hospitals are a place that most folks go to get better, but when these institutes get abandoned, sometimes there's dark reasons why that should maybe stay buried. With dark tales of poor patient treatment, rising death rates, hauntings, and more, it's time to learn about some places that should stay darn well avoided. For starters, there's this abandoned hospital in Victoria, Australia, known as the Beechworth Lunatic Asylum. It was originally known as the Erie Mayday Hills Lunatic Asylum. Yeah, it was not great. Why did it open? Because the only other mental hospital open at the time had overcrowding. It operated for 128 years before it shut down in 1995. In the asylum's confines, more than 9,000 prisoners perished, including a young woman who was for some reason mysteriously tossed from a tall window. Yeah, people still find her when they go exploring there today, and depends on her mood how you will be received. Sometimes she's friendly, sometimes she ignores you, other times, avoid. Before the owner started providing care for tuberculosis patients, the Tranquil Sanatorium was constructed in 1907 as a farm, and then it became the go-to place for folks with tuberculosis. Around it grew a tiny settlement of the same name, containing lovely gardens, homes, a fire brigade, and a number of facilities. This hospital closed in 1958 and reopened to treat the mentally sick in 1959 until 1983, before it was shuttered for good. So the hospital's priorities way back when included teaching self-care and halting the spread of tuberculosis. The infected were treated with a tight rest schedule, nutritious food, and fresh air. Nursing staff reported seeing patients' face covered in ice on winter mornings because they would leave them outside on porches overnight to try and treat their disease. When good medications were launched in the late 1940s, the hospital's dynamics underwent a significant transformation. At the time, sanatoriums kind of lost their value, and that's when the facility was forced to close down. Patients, though, had a lot of weird stuff going on. They were prohibited from starting their own post offices, and they were encouraged to work for free as a form of therapy. Visitors were not usually able to donate supplies like food, clothing, cash, and other necessities, and in response to objections from families who wanted to keep their loved ones close, 55 patients who were not deemed capable of returning to society were transferred to other institutions when this one closed. Even now, the institution is plagued by bizarre orbs, unexplained feelings of grief and anxiety when you walk on the grounds, and crazy temperature swings. There's the ghost of a nurse who was brutally killed by a patient who likes to hang out and haunt anybody who dares to enter. Many abandoned buildings take on a feeling of malevolence thanks to their decay, but the rotting complex of buildings that was once the Forest Haven Asylum was known as a place of death and awfulness long before it stopped being used. Opening in 1925 to serve residents of the District of Columbia, Forest Haven was initially a beacon of progress and quality in treating young souls who were mentally ill, handicapped, or otherwise unable to function normally in society. With over 30 structures on the 250-acre campus, the inmates were taught job skills in a communal farm colony environment that provided them with essential training and an emotionally empowering sense of community. Well, for the first couple of decades, allegedly. By the 1960s, funding for the sprawling institution began to dry up, and devastating cutbacks began to afflict the asylum. Recreational programs were discontinued, and the staff was reduced and replaced with unqualified employees. As the years rolled by, things got progressively worse as the doctors, nurses, and caregivers began taking out their frustrations on the patients, many of whom were harmed bodily and in other ways, and that's if they were given any attention at all. Eventually, a lot of patients died of neglect and related causes. Now, the dead would be passed through the basement morgue and eventually buried in an unmarked field nearby. I mean, like hundreds and hundreds of people died, and according to one report, some were even the subject of medical experiments before the entire institution was shuttered only in 1991. As if the decaying remains of this horrific asylum did not give the site a haunting air, there have also been reports of, those shallow graves, and with shallow graves come a lot of ghosts. I wouldn't recommend going there.
Coming in at 5, Hashima Island, Japan. Hashima Island is an abandoned island lying about 15 kilometers from the city of Nagasaki in southern Japan. It is one of 505 uninhabited islands in Nagasaki Prefecture. The island's most notable features are its abandoned concrete buildings, undisturbed except by nature and the surrounding sea wall. While the island is a symbol of the rapid industrialization of Japan, it is also a reminder of its history as a site of forced labor prior to and during the Second World War. The island reached a peak population of 5,259 in 1959, and in 1974, with the coal reserves nearing depletion, the mine was closed and all of the residents departed soon after, leaving the island effectively abandoned for the following 3 decades. Interest in the island then re-emerged in the 2000s on account of its undisturbed historic ruins, and it gradually became a tourist attraction. The island is increasingly gaining international attention, not only generally for its modern regional heritage, but also for the undisturbed housing complex remnants representative of the period from the Taisho period to the Showa period. It has become a frequent subject of discussion among enthusiasts for ruins. Since the abandoned island has not been maintained, several buildings have collapsed mainly due to typhoon damage, and other buildings are in danger of collapse. However, some of the collapsed exterior walls have been restored with concrete. The island was formally approved as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in July 2015 as part of Japan's sites of Japan's Meiji Industrial Revolution, iron and steel, shipbuilding and coal mining. For Eastern State Penitentiary, Pennsylvania. The Eastern State Penitentiary, also known as ESP, is a former prison in Philadelphia that was operational from 1829 until 1971. The penitentiary refined the revolutionary system of separate incarceration first pioneered at the Walnut Street Jail, which emphasized principles of reform rather than punishment. Notorious criminals such as Al Capone and bank robber Willie Sutton were also held inside its innovative wagon wheel design. Originally, inmates were housed in cells that could only be accessed by entering through a small exercise yard attached to the back of the prison. Only a small portal, just large enough to pass meals, opened onto the cell blocks. The design in turn proved impractical, and in the middle of construction, cells were constructed that allowed prisoners to enter and leave the cell blocks through metal doors that were covered by a heavy wood door to filter out noise. Some believe that the doors were small so prisoners would have a harder time getting out, minimizing an attack on a security guard. Others have explained the small doors forced the prisoners to bow while entering their cells. This design is related to penance and ties to the religious inspiration of the prison. The prison was one of the largest public work projects of the early Republic and was a tourist destination in the 19th century. Visitors spoke with prisoners in their cells, proving that inmates were not isolated, though the prisoners themselves were not allowed to have any visits with family or friends during their stay. The prison is now abandoned, however it operates as a museum and historic site, open year-round. However, those who have visited have noted a weird presence inside its walls, and it is said that its former inmates haven't quite left the building yet. In at number 3, Aniva Rock Lighthouse, Russia. The Aniva Lighthouse was built by the Japanese in 1939 on a chunk of rock off the southern coast of Sakhalin just east of Russia. The island was largely uninhabited until the 1800s when both Japan and Russia became interested in annexing it. A ring of lighthouses were built on Sakhalin's rocky coast to signal incoming troop carriers and merchant ships. After around 50 years of sharing the island, the Russians annexed it all in the Second World War, causing 500,000 Japanese to be evacuated back to Hokkaido. In 1951, the Treaty of San Francisco was signed, officially handing tenure over to the Russians. Now the Aniva Lighthouse is abandoned, including its 7 stories of diesel engines, accumulator rooms, keepers' living spaces, radio facilities, storerooms, large clockwork pendulum, and 300 kg pool of mercury. The place now looks like the perfect location for a horror movie, with the building completely deteriorating upon the rock due to the force of the water and wind. However, if you want to visit, you can. Regular tours are organized from Sakhalin's main city. During the 6-day journey, tourists can not only visit the lighthouse but also enjoy the views of the city.
Coming in number 3, we've got Glen Rio, New Mexico / Texas. Or should I say New Texaco? Maybe that's a little cheesy for your liking, but I'll say it anyway. This border town was once a hotspot for tourists, motorists, evangelists, and top 5 lists. Still is, considering that last one. However, like so many spots built along old school highways, this town relied heavily on those just passing through. So when a much bigger, faster, safer highway opened up far away from Glen Rio's limits, the whole place saw some terrible downswing. Gas stations, eateries, general stores, and mechanics all found that there wasn't much to do if the highway traffic wasn't coming through. A tough break for sure. What remains could pass for a location out of a new Fallout game. Empty buildings adorned with imagery consistent with the campy American dream. Burnt out husks of old cars, never to rev their engines again. Empty sun-bleached motels with rotted out mattresses and busted windows. If anyone wanted to live their post-apocalyptic dream life, here would be the place. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if a few ghouls were roaming the wastes, eking out a modest life amidst the emptiness. When something so obviously meant to be jam-packed with people is devoid of all life, it can be extremely unnerving, and Glen Rio exemplifies this in spades. If I were to visit, I would expect dead silence. However, were some old-fashioned scratchy radio tunes to start playing, I would understand. That's just the ghosts of those who believed in the town trying to boogie after hours. Coming in number 2, we've got Officina Chacabuko in Chile. A lot of ghost towns are left abandoned, with the occasional explorer stumbling through to see what life was all about. When whatever the town relied upon for prosperity, whether it be natural resources, tourism, or celestial protection, runs dry, people drift away. Over time, that means the town is no longer what it used to be, a shell, a husk. It's sad, but it's also just the natural byproduct of industrialization. If a place can no longer be useful, it's cut. However, some people can find other uses for these sinister feeling places. Officina Chacabuko is just such a place. Making its money through nitrate mining at one point, this spot lost a lot of business when petroleum-based fertilizers became the next big thing. Without any other resources to rely upon, those who made their living here had to hightail it out. This left the remote town empty for a number of years. However, during General Pinochet's bloody rule in the 70s, this place was used for something else entirely. Political prisoners would be forcefully brought here and left to fend for themselves in the ghost town. They couldn't escape either, as the regime set up a wicked barrier of barbed wire and landmines. I'm sure more than one individual tried their best to escape, only to end up on the receiving end of some of these implements of death. So whether the town is haunted by the souls of those who lost their livelihood or by those who fought against a dictatorship, it's an extra ghastly ghost town indeed. Coming in at number 1, Pripyat, Ukraine. The ghost town to end all ghost towns. Absolutely full of eerie images, from old propaganda to abandoned, weather-worn dolls. There isn't a creepier experience than sifting through the legendary waste left behind after the Chernobyl nuclear meltdown. After this power plant melted down, introducing the surrounding area to more radiation than 100 times that produced by the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, hundreds of thousands of people had to be evacuated, and fast. For more than 20 years, nobody was allowed back in. Legally anyways, because plenty of folks did go back in spite of warnings against returning. Who knows what the long-term impact of nuclear fallout will be on this area. Generations of wildlife, flora and fauna will be impacted, and the area will be uninhabitable for some time. However, these days the radiation levels are low enough that people can visit the town and take in the ominous vibes. See the abandoned schoolhouses, stroll through homes that were left largely as is since the day of the disaster, witness the destruction caused by the meltdown. The reason behind Pripyat's abandonment aren't that mysterious, but the circumstances surrounding the disaster, the follow-up, and how things are meant to operate now are.
Number 5 on this list is Atlantis Marine Park. We are headed all the way down under for this one because Atlantis Marine Park is actually in Australia. AustralianNews.com writes, Atlantis Marine Park was initially a huge success, with families from WA and beyond flocking to the park to watch the live dolphin shows, swim in the pools, ride pedal boats, and have their obligatory photo with King Neptune, a huge statue at the entrance to the park. However, in 1990, just 9 years after opening, Atlantis shut its doors. Western Australia's boom never eventuated, and the 1987 stock market crash put a halt to prosperity. Atlantis closed due to financial difficulty and was left abandoned. It has since been damaged by vandals and has become overgrown and derelict. Old statues can still be found scattered throughout the grounds, as well as broken walls and concrete pools. For years, it was no man's land, popular with dog walkers. However, just last month, the iconic King Neptune was restored to its former glory after a petition by locals who started an online campaign for something to be done with the ruins. Well, I'm glad to see that Neptune is looking fresh again, but I don't know how long he'll stay that way. Apparently, this place, when the sun goes down, is home to some evil creatures. Four-legged mutant things with glowing red eyes that hiss and are nothing that we know of from this world. Now, this could be a bunch of baloney, but that's what some people have reported seeing when they've explored this place at night. Probably safe to go during the daytime, just make sure you set an alarm for 6 p.m. to get out of there if you do go. Number 4 on this list is Crinkly Bottom Theme Park. This one, to my understanding, has been demolished, but it still deserves a spot on this list because of how creepy it was when it was around. Mr. Mr. Blobby was a TV caricature in the early 1990s. He was featured on one of Britain's most successful late-night Saturday television shows and was this big pink blob creature with a bow tie on. This was a comedy television show, and this blob thing didn't lack any of that. He would often engage in annoying antics with celebrity guests and become a bit of a British television phenomenon. Well, Mr. Blobby was successful enough that he of course needed toys, merchandise, and heck, while we're at it, let's give him his own amusement park. Sometimes what works well on TV doesn't always translate to a fun amusement park though. Crinkly Bottom was what they called it, and it opened up in 1994. This annoying sidekick's popularity didn't last forever though, and this amusement park's life was very short-lived. The place shut down in 1996 because it simply was not making enough money. Then it faded away into obscurity and everybody forgot about this interesting little business venture. That was until 2009 though, when some urban explorers stumbled upon it again. The once bright and beautiful Blobby Land looked like something straight out of a horror film. It was worn and gross and just reeked of evil. Animals had taken up residence there, and based on how the place looked, it wouldn't have been surprising if some sketchy characters once did business there too. You can't visit it now because it's demolished, but you really shouldn't have been going when it was around anyways. Number 3 on this list is Boblo Island. I had to include Boblo Island on this list to give a bit of a shout out to Ontario, where your boy grew up. Boblo Island was wildly successful for a time and operated for nearly a century. As with a lot of places on this list though, it couldn't seem to power through the 90s and had to shut down. Reader's Digest says, picture an 1898 Victorian amusement park, music from an organ grinder, women's skirts swishing around the dance hall, children's laughter echoing from various newfangled rides. That's what this theme park on Boys Blank Island, nicknamed Boblo, near Detroit on the Canadian side of the Detroit River was to residents alike. Its doors were shut nearly 100 years later in 1993, and the area is now closed to the public. But you can boat or kayak by the remains, listening for the ghostly sounds of long past visitors. While you can't stay here overnight, you can rent these 8 haunted places on Airbnb. Being on an island really adds to the creepiness for me, I think. Like this place, from all the pictures I could find, it really looks totally detached from all other society. Basically meaning that whatever happens here, you are totally by yourself. Like there is a new set of rules for this island. There have been stories that something lurks here, a spirit or something dark. Be very careful if you ever go to Boblo Island.
In at number 3 we have Kennecott, Alaska. A once flourishing town with businesses, shops, a train and a lively community is now left as a ghost town. The town of Kennecott in Alaska was flooded with people after copper was discovered in 1900. After the discovery, a group of wealthy investors formed the Kennecott Copper Corporation to mine the mountains above the Kennecott and Root glaciers. In the 27 years the mine was in full operation, the company and town grew significantly in fortune and people, and at its peak Kennecott employed 600 people. But by 1938 the copper was mostly gone, the mine was shut down and the town was left abandoned. The town was abruptly abandoned by its citizens, leaving most of their possessions behind. Since the middle of the 1950s the place had been completely deserted, with the railroad discontinued service that same year. Reports of ghosts along the abandoned tracks of the Kennecott train have been claimed for decades, while other visitors report having seen old tombstones along the route of the tracks, though the gravestones then vanish by the time the visitors make their return trip. Others have reported hearing disembodied voices and phantom children laughing. Reportedly, a 1990s construction project were halted after workers were scared away by the creepy sounds and unexplainable events. In at number 2 we have Xunantunich, Belize. I hope that's how you say it. Deep in the jungle of Belize lies an ancient ruins of an abandoned town that has been left to crumble. The town has been left abandoned for over 1,000 years, though before the abandonment of this large and populated town, Xunantunich was a thriving metropolis. The first construction at the site dates back to sometime in 200 AD, with the growth of the town continuing until its final days of functioning as a city. The town grew to consist of many temples and palaces, including its largest and most recognizable, known as El Castillo. Xunantunich has lied abandoned since around 1000 AD. It is thought that due to consistent devastating events such as an earthquake and other natural disasters, caused a sudden evacuation of the large Mayan city around 700 AD. The disaster caused extensive damage to the main pyramid of Xunantunich. Although the city city was reoccupied sometime after, it only remained active for another 300 years before it was left completely unoccupied. After abandonment, the site remained empty, eventually being encapsulated by the surrounding jungle and nature, until it was rediscovered by explorers in the early 1890s. The name Xunantunich comes from the ghost stories that have haunted the ghost town for years. The ghost story of Xunantunich is rumoured to start in 1893, after the first sighting of the ghost happened. The first ghost sighting goes as one morning a man who was part of a research team working on the site saw what he described as a Mayan maiden ascending the staircase of the Xunatunich's main pyramid. This vision caught him by surprise, so he continued to watch as the woman walked further up the stairs. Suddenly she stopped and turned to look at the man, where he was able to get a glimpse of her glowing red eyes that pierced his soul. She then turned to continue her climb to the top of the pyramid, where she would disappear amongst its stone columns. The shocked man quickly assembled a team to search for this woman, yet no trace of her was ever found. Since this sighting, countless more visitors have reported to also spot the ghostly maiden who haunts Xunantunich. She is always described to be ascending El Castillo's stairs. To this day, the sightings and reports from visitors continue. The ghost frequency is what gives Xunantunich its name, which translates to the Stone Lady in the Mayan language. Some believe that this Mayan maiden have formerly lived within the city many years ago. Others believe that she was a human sacrifice, trapped to relive her last moments of ascending to the top of the pyramid where her ritual would have been conducted. Then there are a few who believe her to be some sort of ancient godly spirit linked to the site and the Mayan culture. And finally, in at number 1 we have Calico, California. The ghost town of Calico can be found in California, midway between Barstow and Yermo. The beginning of the town started in 1875 and was built under the impression that there were prospects for silver in the Calico Mountains. But in the spring of 1883, many of the local miners left Calico when borax was discovered 3 miles east at Borate. Though Calico again boomed in 1884 as additional silver discoveries were made. Gaining a population of some 2,500, the town supported 24 saloons and gambling dives that never closed, as well as more establishments such as the church, public school, dance school and a literary society, along with dozens of retail businesses. By the late 1800s, Calico was bustling with prospectors searching for their fortunes, and the Calico mining district became one of the richest in the state. Calico's final decline began when the price of silver fell in the 1890s, but the break production kept it alive, even through the panic of 1906. They tried to hold on, and borax for a time substituted for the shiny metal that had been the Calico's fortune. Calico kept churning out valuable minerals until it finally exhausted its supply in the 1920s. Calico was soon abandoned and left to gradually decay in the desert sun until little remained, but in 1951 it was purchased by the Walter Knott, an ex-miner, and rebuilt as a modern ghost town. He restored the town to mostly how it was, in certain cases rebuilding some of the old structures as they were back in the 1880s. Considered one of the top haunted locations in California, Calico has its fair share of ghost stories, when one of the most active and known ghosts of the abandoned town is Lucy Lane. Lucy is often seen in a black lace dress walking back and forth between her home and store. Others have allegedly seen phantom school teachers and other residents who have been known to grab visitors' legs or pinch their ankles. Some visitors have also reported seeing a floating red light inside the buildings, while other visitors have reported extreme cold spots throughout the mine and an eerie feeling in various places of the town.
Coming in at number 5, we've got the Ground Church Tower. Take one look at this ominous tower poking out of the water and tell me it's not cursed, or filled with treasure, and the treasure's cursed. Sure, it's a church, and churches are places of peace and light, but this one has a tragic story behind it. It was once a lovely place of worship located in South Tyrol, Italy. Folks would come and participate in some pretty average church activities. However, in the 50s, major change was on the horizon. The town needed a new source of energy. In the end, they decided that building an artificial lake would be the way to go. They filled a wide expanse with water and ended up flooding the church. I suppose it was cheaper just to leave some of the buildings as they were instead of demolishing them first. The result is stunning and a little bit ominous. These days, you can see the bell tower peeking out from the top of the water. The rest of the church is down below, wallowing in the murky depths. It sort of feels like a water level in a video game with plenty to explore and frustration abound. I mean, imagine descending into the depths and wading through the many waterlogged chambers hidden below. There could be anything waiting down there. Spirits of wildlife that may have been caught up in the artificial lake, the long lingering ghosts of old churchgoers doomed to float about. It's fascinating and fear-inducing. Coming in at number 4, we've got the Sorrento Abandoned Mill, another Italian cursed building. If you ever visit Naples, you can take a day and head off the beaten path. A canyon nearby is known as the Valley of the Mills and houses all sorts of awesome structures. Ages and ages ago, a flour mill was built. For years it operated, providing flour to the surrounding regions. In fact, it apparently managed to do so for hundreds of years. And if you're at all familiar with the operation of mills before standard safety practices were introduced, you know they were death traps. So for hundreds of years, folks toiled away, grinding out flour and occasionally some workers. Uh-oh. Now, these deaths didn't mean that the mill had to close, it was seen as an occupational hazard of sorts. But then, in the late 19th century, it became isolated from the sea. Tasso Square was built, and this caused the mill to become less practical. Humidity rose in the area, and the mill was forced to shut down. Years later, the building was ultimately closed for good. So we've got a historic mill in a valley closed due to societal progress. Sounds like a recipe for ghosts or a curse to me. If you look at it these days, you'll agree. The mill has been totally overtaken by nature. Greenery has consumed the ancient structure, giving it a foreboding and abandoned look. Moss and lichens cover pretty much every square inch of the walls, essentially daring anyone to come and explore. But be careful if you do, it's hard to tell what might be hidden among the foliage. Maybe a mill worker's ghost missing some essential limbs, or a foreman who lost everything when the grindstones stopped grinding. I hope it was worth it. Progress.
In at number 2, we have Pyramid in Norway. Some say that the Soviet town of Pyramid in Norway was abandoned overnight, and for a good reason. Located in Svalbard, an archipelago situated between Norway and the North Pole, Pyramiden can be reached by boat from about mid-May until the beginning of October, when waters bordering the town are free from sea ice. Established in the 17th century, the town was used as a base for whaling and walrus trapping. Though at the start of the 20th century the culture shifted to coal mining. At first, Pyramiden was a sleepy place with hardly any residents at all, but after World War II, the Soviets allocated more money to the town. They constructed dozens of new buildings, including a hospital, a recreation center called the Cultural Palace, and a large cafeteria. In the 1980s, the town's population reached its peak of more than 1,000 people, but not long, due to the wake of the Soviet Union's dissolution, the town would be left completely abandoned. As when the Soviet Union fell apart, mining stopped in Pyramiden, and the miners had to leave. On March 31st, 1998, the last coal was extracted from the mine, and the approximately 300 workers who still lived there began shipping out. The residents never returned, and today the town still stands much as it was when the last men departed. And finally, in at number 1, we have Batstow Village, New Jersey. There are around 28 known ghost towns in New Jersey, but this one has to be the most terrifying. Founded in 1766, the Batstow Village was built primarily to accommodate once prosperous ironworks. At the time, the site possessed 3 valuable resources: water for mills, abundant wood for charcoal, and naturally occurring bog iron. During the Revolutionary War, Batstow supplied the Continental Army with iron, while its remoteness protected it from British attack. In 1784, Batstow was bought by William Richard, whose family owned and operated the ironworks for 92 years. Following the discovery of coal and ore in Pennsylvania, in the 1840s the iron industry began to dwindle in the Batstow village. Nervous they were going to run out of business, the Richards family exploited another abundant local resource, sand, to make glass. But in 1874 a house fire spread and destroyed the glass making facilities, remaining furnaces, and 17 houses that were in the town. Due to the destruction of the glass facilities, the town of Batstow and the Richards family fell into bankruptcy. The Richards and many of the villagers moved away after the accident, leaving the site silent. In 1876, the property, along with huge tracts of land around it, was purchased by industrialist and businessman Joseph Wharton, with the plan of reinventing the declining town into an agricultural, foresting, and cranberry farm. But after his death in 1909, the land was held by a trust until purchased by the state in 1954 to form the Wharton State Forest. The state's plan for the town was to restore its 50-room mansion, as well as to rebuild the dam that was located on the lake, though the efforts to reinvent Batstow weren't enough to save it from its inevitable end. As when the state of New Jersey bought the village with a plan of improving it, the residents didn't see a future in the town, so they all left it, with roots that can be traced back to 1766 and the last remaining resident leaving in 1989. There are more than 40 structures still standing in the historic town, including a charcoal kiln, carriage houses, stables, ice and milk houses, a blacksmith, general store, gristmill, and a wheelwright shop, though they are all left untouched since the last residents left in 1989.
Coming in number 5, Centralia, Pennsylvania. Sounds like a nice enough place, right? Who would abandon a prosperous coal mining community filled with interesting folks and a fun name? Well, anyone who likes to breathe things other than noxious gas. Oh, this one is less a mystery and more of a straight up fact, but the abandonment is super scary regardless of how you look at it. Way back in the day, Centralia was bustling. Rich veins of coal were discovered underneath the earth here, and folks were really excited to bring it up to the surface. What better way to make a profit? Unfortunately, this subterranean resource and favorite of Minecraft kids across the globe is also the reason for Centralia's downfall. The very same stuff that brought about plenty of business also made the town uninhabitable. Tragic, and maybe a nice little microcosm of the human experience. Apparently a landfill burn spread a little further than folks were expecting and ignited the underground coal. From an abandoned coal mine to the rich veins of black gold underground, this fire spread like, well, wildfire, scorching everything around. 140 acres of town, gone, just like that. A lot of it is still standing, but it's not safe to be around. The underground fires belch all sorts of horrid smoke, and many large sinkholes opened up due to the fire's influence. These days you might sense a presence or two while passing by, but don't worry, they're not ghosts, not yet anyways. Of the few thousand who used to live there, only about a half dozen remain. They refused to abandon their once lovely town, determined to live amidst the smoke and gas, the fire and flames. It doesn't look like the fires are going out anytime soon either. Some estimates see the blaze continuing on for a few hundred years, thanks to the constant supply of fuel underground. Coming in number 4, we've got Deception Island, Antarctica. Another wild and wonderful name. If I could choose to name the place I lived in anything, Deception would definitely be on the list. That's the kind of town that famous folk albums get named after, a place of legend for miles around. A place of rest perhaps, or place of mystery. Deception is often thought of as a negative thing. Nobody likes being lied to, but if it's done well enough, deception can achieve plenty of things. But I'm getting off topic. We should be discussing the actual abandoned place, full of mystery, full of danger. Deception Island was a long-used whaling station back in the day. Norwegian folks would post up there for long stretches of time, enjoying the island's safe natural harbor. Eventually it became known for its research potential, attracting all sorts of folks from Britain and Chile. Now, I know what you're all thinking. A research base out in the middle of deep freeze nowhere. Well, there's gotta be some sort of lunatic alien there, morphing into different shapes and eating everyone for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And my mind went to the same place. But even after all of this, the island was also used as a British base during World War II, so maybe less deadly aliens after all, because the soldiers would have run into something like that. Although this island is also home to the largest cemetery in Antarctica, so chew on that for however long you need to. These days, the area is protected as a heritage site, so all of the abandoned, decrepit shacks, huts, and buildings are still there to be seen. Who knows what secrets and spirits lurk within, perishing due to cold, war, or something more supernatural. Oh, and one last thing about this location. Even though it's as cold as ice and difficult for any living being to survive out here, there is something else that makes it even more dangerous. There are occasional volcanic eruptions on the island. Pardon me? So yeah, you'd best stay far, far away from this long abandoned haven. Even haven seems like a bit of a misnomer, don't you think?
Established in 1827 as the Genesee County Poorhouse, then the Genesee County Infirmary added in 1938, the Rolling Hills Asylum was originally a working farm that became a dumping ground for the cast-offs of society. Orphans mingled with what were called lunatics at the time, and the unclaimed dead were buried on the property. Over 1,700 documented deaths and hundreds of more not accounted for. Known for Class A EVPs, shadow people, doors slamming, and much more, this place is haunted with a capital H. It is allegedly the second most haunted location in all of North America and number 4 in the world. On April 26 of 2008, the Connecticut Paranormal Encounters and Research Team did an overnight public ghost hunt at Rolling Hills. So originally they went on the general public tour, and afterwards watched this short video. Apparently there were about 50 people present during this little tour group, and the team was allowed to hang around afterwards and do their own investigation. So they went to the basement area because they didn't want to disturb the tours, and they used a lot of common ghost hunting devices, digital audio recorders, video recorders with night vision, thermometer gauges, EMF readers, flash cameras, you name it. So when it came to what did they catch on camera, they did get a lot of orbs and pictures, some being more impressive than others, and apparently at one point when they went near a nurse's station door, there was a lot of mist formation around it. On film, they did catch a rather interesting find using a flashlight for an experiment on the second floor hallway, where the doors to the solarium were known to move on their own. And also, you get a lot of shadows of people standing and walking behind the doors that aren't there. So the folks who were doing the investigating placed a flashlight on the other side of the doors in the solarium while they sat in the hallway to see if they could catch sight of any of these shadows walking about. So there was no way in or out of the solarium other than this door. So after placing that flashlight, they caught a lot of ghosts walking by. And also, the flashlight kept flickering. To note, the flashlight had not had any problems with flickering previously. All the batteries were fresh. This had never happened. They also caught a lot of EVPs with their digital audio recorders. One very impressive one was when one fellow was trying to provoke the shadow people into coming into the hallway, and following a request of being like, "Hey, come on out," they heard back an elderly lady yelling, "You, go away," which they didn't hear that when they were actually recording. This was just afterwards. When they actually arrived at the facility earlier in the day, by the way, one of the team members had felt a dizziness that stayed with them while they were there all day and only went away when they left the area. When they went to go investigate the electrotherapy room, they experienced 2 episodes of sharp pain that lasted approximately 1 minute to the left side of their head and right above the left eye, which is not fun, and it was only in that room. So they returned on another date for a private investigation. Once again, normal day, super chill. Well, they heard a disembodied voice calling out the name of one of their investigators, and 2 other people heard it, and you could hear it on the recorders. They were like, "Nobody's here to call it this name." When they were investigating a part of the house that had nobody in it, there was a lot of sounds of walking, shuffling around, and when they went to look and find it, nobody was there. And finally for today, built in 1884 on what was then the outskirts of Hamilton, Ontario, Century Manor was the second major structural component of the Hamilton Asylum for the Insane, an institution initially established for the treatment of folks who drank a lot. The story of this manor is an unusually grim one, even for an asylum. Newspaper articles published in the late 19th and early 20th centuries documented at least 9 self-taken lives in the building, as well as several attempts made by inmates who escaped the hospital. This place was also the scene of several strange accidents and horrific crimes. One female patient fell to her death while attempting to escape out a window using a rope made from bed sheets, while another had her skull crushed by a falling elevator. One particularly troublesome male inmate was allegedly harmed by orderlies to the point of death, while another split open the head of the asylum's head baker with a weapon. The staggering number of heinous crimes committed at Century Manor are more comprehensible in light of the appalling state in which the institution was kept. As one former inmate put it in a letter to the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, "Your insane asylum at Hamilton is an outrage to civilization. Wretched vileness is the order of the institution, and more things I can't say." Of all the dramas that unfolded on the stage of this place, perhaps the strangest was a fire that mysteriously broke out on the building's top floor on the morning of August 1st of 1911. Firefighters who battled the blaze claimed that 3 of the inmates, whom they rescued from the burning building, broke away from them and leapt back into the inferno. When the embers finally cooled, firefighters found 8 bodies among the ashes, including somebody who had burned to death in their cell, as well as 5 men huddled together in a small room. The historic building shut its doors for good in 1995 and has sat empty ever since, with a lot of ghost stories.
Number 2 on this list is the Ospedale Psichiatrico di Volterra. This abandoned lunatic asylum is located in Italy. All That's Interesting says the asylum at Volterra was meant to be a sort of haven where patients could roam and do as they pleased. There were shops, a gardening company, and a judicial section which became known as the Fairy Pavilion. But the hospital's idyllic objective was sidelined after the facility became overcrowded. By the 1960s, the Ospedale Psichiatrico di Volterra was one of the country's most populated hospitals with more than 6,000 patients. This was largely due to how easy it was to be committed to the hospital, and patients were admitted on the faintest signs of depression to accusations of moral transgressions. The facility was run like a prison, with nurses being referred to as guards or supervisors. Patients were treated like inmates and often sedated or isolated. The cures they were given included electroshock treatments, insulin-induced comas, and ice tank submersions. Patients at the Volterra facility suffered immensely until the hospital was abandoned in 1978 following the passage of the Poveglia law, which mandated the closure of all mental hospitals in Italy. I didn't even know that ice tank submersions or insulin-induced comas were a real thing. I just thought stuff like that existed in shows like Stranger Things, but that actually happened. Last I checked, an insulin-induced coma isn't gonna help anyone with schizophrenia. Number 1 on this list is the Willard Asylum. Once again, guys, we have an asylum who initially wanted to help people but ended up doing the exact opposite. All That's Interesting says Willard was a state-of-the-art facility that featured a gymnasium, arts and craft classes, a movie theater, and even a bowling alley. It was meant to be a place where people living with mental illnesses could either devote themselves to their recovery or live in a safe and active environment. One of the hospital's main missions was to treat patients with the goal of preparing them to rejoin society. Despite this ideal, the hospital fell victim to the incomplete ideas and harsh treatments of its day. Patients were still subjected to electroshock therapy and ice baths, and some patients were kept at the asylum until their deaths. Many were buried under unmarked tombstones that still dot the abandoned asylum's grounds. The hospital was finally shut down in 1995. Perhaps most tragic about the asylum's history, however, was the discovery of hundreds of suitcases that were found cataloged in the hospital's attic upon its closure. These were the belongings of patients who died in the hospital and were unclaimed by next of kin. The staff was apparently unable to throw these mementos away. Hundreds of suitcases, guys. Not 1 or 2 or 10, hundreds. That's hundreds of people who died here and were put in unmarked graves. Hundreds of people who died here and whose families either didn't care enough about them to go claim their belongings or were never informed that they died. I'm so happy that times have changed and the stigma around mental health and its treatment is lifting. 100 years ago, the last thing you would have wanted is to have someone try and help you with whatever it is that you're dealing with.
Coming in at number 5, we have Ross Island. Located on an island in India closer to Southeast Asia than India, the island is known for beautiful beaches, unique marine life, coral reefs, and largely undisturbed forests. But beyond the island's beautiful views and stunning wildlife lies a dark past. Ross Island is one of the 572 islands that make up the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Now, the island is a ghost town where the remnants of a 19th century British settlement lie in ruins. In 1857, reacting to an unanticipated Indian revolt, the British Empire chose remote islands as the site of a penal colony, and Ross Island was one of them. The British first arrived in 1858 with 200 Indian convicts. The deadly task of clearing the thick jungle fell upon the inmates, while the officers stayed on the ships. Moreover, the development and town built at Ross Island began in 1858, and the prisoners were forced to build its buildings. The island was transformed to resemble a British town, with houses, offices, clubhouses, bakeries, stores, churches, and everything else that the British would not miss when they were away from home. The British ruled Ross Island for more than 80 years, up until nature was against the development. In 1941, a gigantic earthquake affected the island and left the town on the island completely ruined. The British thought rebuilding the town would not be worth it, and overnight left the island in complete ruins. Abandoned in the 1940s, the island is now being reclaimed by nature. Homes, a massive church, ballrooms, and even a graveyard all are in varying stages of decomposition, being taken over by an unyielding forest. In at number 4, we have Tulingua, Texas. Near the Mexican border, you'll find the town of Tulingua, Texas. In the 1800s, it was discovered that the area in which Tulingua was built was plentiful in cinnabar, a red mercury sulfide, from which mercury can be extracted. This caused an influx of miners to the area, but it wasn't until Jack Dawson's discovery and production of the area's first mercury in 1888 that it drew a population of 2,000, and by 1900 there were 4 mining companies in the area. When the Chiso's mining company opened in the mid-1800s, workers and their families quickly relocated to the Tulingua, Texas. The Chiso's Mining Company was founded and began operations in 1903 near Tulingua, Texas. The company specialized in the extraction of quicksilver and mercury. In 1799, Charles Harvard discovered that compounding the element produced fulminate mercury crystals, establishing its marketability. These crystals are useful in the production of gunpowder cartridges and shells. Mercury production had peaked during the First World War, but began to fall, thus Chiso's Mining Company had filed for bankruptcy and the miners began to trickle out. When the mine went bankrupt in 1942, Perry sold it and moved away. The population was around 3,000 at its peak, though it said that everyone up and left the municipality in the 1940s once the mercury was picked through. Thus, the once busy city became the ghost town we know today. It is now home to 110 people. By the end of the war, it was an abandoned ghost town. Coming in at number 2, Willard Asylum, New York. The Willard Asylum for the Chronic Insane is a former state hospital in Willard, New York near Seneca Lake. The asylum was originally meant to rescue mentally ill people from county facilities where they were typically kept, often chained up or in cages. At Willard, the idea was that patients could be treated and hopefully rejoin society. In reality, Willard was more of a prison than it was a hospital, with patients being kept until the administrators decided they could leave. However, many never did. Worse still, not everyone who found themselves in the asylum were actually insane. Now, as of today, Willard is abandoned, but much of it still remains. The bowling alley built inside its walls during the later years is still standing, with several decaying pins remaining at the end of the lanes. The morgue is also still intact, with the autopsy tables in place next to the drawers where the bodies were stored. Now, in those days when a person died, it was shameful to have one's family name on the grave of a mental hospital. As such, out of respect, none of the graves were marked. Today, efforts are underway to find out who is buried in the graves and replace numbers with names. In the attic is where things have been unearthed though. In 1995, the same year the asylum closed, hundreds of suitcases were discovered in the attic. They had been left behind by the patients who never left the asylum. More than half of the 50,000 patients that came to Willard died within its walls, making this building one of the scariest in history. Finally coming in at number 1, Pripyat, the Chernobyl abandoned city. Yes, we're discussing an entire city with this one, not just one specific building, because honestly there are way too many. Pripyat is a ghost city in northern Ukraine, near the Ukraine-Belarus border. The city was founded on February 4th, 1970 as the 9th nuclear city in the Soviet Union to serve the nearby Chernobyl nuclear power plant. It was officially proclaimed a city in 1979 and had grown to a population of 49,360 by the time it was evacuated on the afternoon of April 27, 1986, the day after the Chernobyl disaster. The Chernobyl disaster was a nuclear accident that occurred on the 26th of April 1986 at the number 4 nuclear reactor in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant near the city of Pripyat in the north of the Ukrainian SSR. It is to this day considered the worst nuclear disaster in history and is one of only 2 nuclear energy disasters rated at 7, the maximum severity on the International Nuclear Event Scale. The accident began during a safety test on an RBMK-type nuclear reactor, which was commonly used throughout the Soviet Union. During this test, a large amount of energy was suddenly released, vaporizing superheated cooling water and rupturing the reactor core in a highly destructive steam explosion. This was immediately followed by an open-air reactor core fire that released considerable airborne radioactive contamination for about 9 days that precipitated onto parts of the USSR and Western Europe before finally being contained on May 4th, 1986. Due to the radiation left behind, the entire city was evacuated, and all that remains are the abandoned buildings and a haunting Ferris wheel standing motionless in time. It had been scheduled to have its official opening 5 days after the disaster, in time for May Day celebrations. The Azure swimming pool and Avanhard Stadium are 2 other popular tourist attractions. You can only stay there 2 hours, otherwise you die. In at number 5 we have St. Elmo, Colorado. St. Elmo, Colorado was a former gold mining camp in Chaffee Country. Today it is one of the best preserved ghost towns in Colorado, as the entire district was placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1979. The area was originally settled in 1878 and was made official in 1880, when gold and silver began to bring many people to the area. At one point the population reached more than 2,000 people. In 1881 the Denver, South Park and Pacific Railroad came through the area and a station was built in St. Elmo. From here the tracks continued to Romley, Hancock and through the historic Alpine Tunnel. St. Elmo was considered the main source of supplies arriving by train for the area settlers, and eventually several merchandise stores, 5 hotels, a telegraph office, a town hall, 5 restaurants, 2 sawmills, a schoolhouse, a weekly newspaper called The Mountaineer, and numerous saloons and dance halls filled the town. The miners worked at several mines throughout the area that were rich in silver, gold, copper and iron. In 1890 a fire destroyed the business section and the town was never entirely rebuilt. This was about the same time that St. Elmo's peaked in population with about 2,000 residents. Afterward, many of the mines were depleted and many miners moved out of the area. More mines continued to fail in the ensuing years and the closure of the Alpine Tunnel in 1910. The state of the structures paired with depleting mines led many in the community in search of new, more prosperous mining towns to call home. The railroad continued to run until 1922, and it has been said that the rest of St. Elmo's population rode the last train out of town, never to return. In 1969, the United States recognized St. Elmo as a historic district, and soon after, it became a unique tourist attraction that's open to the public, showcasing what life was like in the Old West. There is no shortage of urban legends and reports of hauntings in St. Elmo, but the most common occurrence of paranormal activity centers around the town's most notable family. To this day, one of the members of the Stark family still can be spotted in the ghost town. Anton's only daughter Annabelle resided there until she died in 1960. As legend has it, Annabelle continued her promise to protect the city even after she took her last breath. In at number 4 we have Rhyolite, Nevada. Founded in 1904 and abandoned by 1916, Rhyolite was one of several short-lived boom towns from the late gold rush era. People were drawn to the desert on the edge of Death Valley by the promise of gold found amongst quartz in local mines. And by 1906 the town had all the promising indicators of permanence and the largest population in the area. The town's citizens had an active social life, including baseball games, dances, basket socials, whist parties, tennis, a symphony, Sunday school picnics, basketball games, Saturday night variety shows at the Opera House, and pool tournaments. In 1906, Countess Majowski opened the Alaska Glacier Ice Cream Parlor to the delight of the local citizenry. That same year, an enterprising miner, Tom T. Kelly, built a bottle house out of 50,000 beer and liquor bottles. But in 1907, the US financial markets were rocked by panic that saw closures of banks, businesses, and mines. Rhyolite began to falter. The mine closed in 1911. Some claim that Rhyolite, about 120 miles northwest of Las Vegas, was once home to thousands of people, though not much remains of its glory days, which lasted less than 20 years. Set up in 1905, the town was a mining hotspot, but after the richest ore was exhausted, workers left for a new pasture, and the population had dropped to close to zero by 1920. Industrialist Charles M. Schwab invested heavily in Rhyolite's infrastructure, which boasted a school, electric lights, water mains, newspapers, a hospital, and even an opera house, some of which can be seen today. There are only around 10 significant structures, yet the site is very evocative. The crumbling remains set against a backdrop of stark desert hills. In at number 3 we have Jazirat Al-Hamra, which is best known as the ghost town of the United Arab Emirates, is said to be the country's most haunted place, remaining a number of spooky events experienced by the locals and curious visitors. Jazirat Al-Hamra is an abandoned village located to the south of the city of Ras Al Khaimah, one of the 7 emirates that form the UAE. The coastal territory is the region's best example of a pre-oil village, displaying 3 distinct types of early and mid-20th century Gulf architecture. The town of Ras Al Khaimah is the crumbling remains of a once thriving fishing village. The name translates to Red Island for the red and bronze color of the sand on which the town was built. The former tidal island was predominantly home to the Zab tribe, who by 1831 developed the area into a renowned pearling trade center. It was home to over 4,000 inhabitants and dozens of fishing and trading ships, and with its good fortune came expansion that continued well into the start of the 20th century. But by 1968, Jazirat Al-Hamra became nothing more than an abandoned town, due to a clash between the tribe and Sheikh Saka bin Mohammed of Ras Al Khaimah due to some unclear reasons. Thus, most of them migrated to Abu Dhabi. The village consisted of 334 buildings, including 18 shops and 11 mosques, and is nearly unchanged since its people left in 1968. Jazirat Al-Hamra, now filled-in patch of land in the south of Ras Al Khaimah, remained abandoned and untouched. However, rumor has it that this extraordinary quiet and silent village is extremely haunted by the jinns. People even gossip that they can hear the strange noise and disembodied voices near the beach of this ghost village. Many visitors also assert that they felt uneasy, like danger was lurking, waiting for them when they pressed on further into the haunted village. Some of them even claim to have reported seeing unexplainable handprints on the ruined pillars and walls, and experienced many more paranormal things within this haunted ghost town.
Number 2. West Virginia Penitentiary. Almost heaven. West Virginia. Blue Ridge Mountains and haunted prisons. The Appalachians might be home to one of the most beautiful parts of the United States, States, but West Virginia Penitentiary is anything but. In 1863, after West Virginia seceded from Virginia Classic, the new fledgling state needed its own prison, and Moundsville, West Virginia was chosen as the home for their new state pen. The prison's conditions were unlivable. West Virginia Penn frequently made the Department of Justice's top 10 violent prisons in the country. Idea for a new video. An infamous spot in the prison was known as the Sugar Shack, a small rec room for the inmates that served as a hotbed for all kinds of violent illegal activity. The prison is also home to a famous electric chair that an inmate was forced to build, nicknamed Old Sparky. Old Sparky is still standing there today. In the 1950s, the prison was so overcrowded that 3 prisoners at a time would be shoved into one cramped 7 by 5 foot cell. The men were kept like animals in cages. Riots and violent outbursts were fairly commonplace. The prison was overcrowded, dilapidated and run down, and staffed by overwhelmed guards. Eventually, the prison would be forced to open its gates, decommissioning as a prison and shipping all of its inmates elsewhere. The building still stands and is used as a training facility for law enforcement officers, but it's been said that the spirits of those whose lives ended here still wander. Hunters report equipment malfunctioning walking by the Sugar Shack or any of the cell blocks where the more violent inmates were housed. Reports of banging on the walls late at night, as well as random screams, are fairly commonplace too. The prison was reportedly haunted while inmates still populated it, with some of the earliest stories of hauntings stemming from the 1930s. It's thought that the prison was built on top of an indigenous gravesite of the Adena people, which has led to some speculation as perhaps an explanation for the hauntings. Like most of the prisons on this list, if you're curious enough yourself, West Virginia Penn is available to visit for tours, and you can even pop by the Sugar Shack and Old Sparky. And finally, number 1, Alcatraz. Alcatraz might very well be the United States' most infamous prison. On Alcatraz Island, just outside of San Fran, lies the notorious jail, built to house America's most deadly inmates, like Al Capone, Arthur Barker, or George Kelly. It was home to a legendary breakout that was made into a film, Escape from Alcatraz, and also set the stage for Michael Bay's action classic The Rock, which was about breaking into Alcatraz. The prison was built to drain the hope out of inmates, to break the spirits of the most rebellious inmates, and was legendary for its awful conditions. Tiny cramped cells, indifferent guards, and frequent bouts of violence and riots were all commonplace. It was once referred to as the Great Garbage Can of San Francisco, where every other federal prison dumped their worst apples. So it's no surprise, given its brutal conditions, that the island is home to several spirits and hauntings from souls that just can't move on. Most ghost investigators report that the hottest spot for paranormal activity in the building is cell 14D, a cell that was also nicknamed the Hole. Gotta wonder if they borrowed that from Eastern State. It was where the most unruly prisoners would be kept when they were being difficult. It's been said that even walking by 14D, you'll immediately feel something's wrong, as if a dark presence or energy is in the room with you. An inmate once spent his last days in 14D, screaming that he was being hunted by an otherworldly creature. Visitors report hearing crying and moaning while walking through cell blocks A, B, and C, where most of the population would have been kept. It's said that a ghost named the Butcher walks through these halls after an inmate named Butcher Malkowitz, a mob hitman, was whacked by another inmate. Now, if this isn't enough haunting for you, some dark tourists also report hearing discordant, disembodied banjo strumming, thought to be a holdover from the spirit of Al Capone, who used to play his banjo in the prison band. Although the prison was decommissioned in 1963, it reopened shortly after, now as a museum and a haunted tour popular with Bay Area locals and visitors curious about learning about one of America's darkest prisons and perhaps its most haunted. Visit if you dare, but just make sure you're able to leave.
In 5th place, we have Isla de las Muñecas, Mexico. Decided to kick off today by being an overachiever. This is an entire abandoned island. The island of the dolls in Mexico is like something straight out of a horror movie, but my kind of horror movie. Located on Texuelo Lake, it is home to hundreds of hanging, slowly decaying dolls, thanks to a man named Don Julian Santana. Over 50 years ago, Don Santana left his wife and child and moved onto an island on Texuelo Lake in the Exoquimilicos canals. According to him, a young girl actually drowned in the lake in the 1950s, and Don Julian Santana devoted his life to honoring this lost soul by collecting and hanging up dolls by the hundreds. Eventually, he transformed the entire island into a doll-infested wonderland. Now, he began collecting lost dolls from the canals and the trash near his island home. He's also said to have traded produce he grew to locals for more dolls. Don didn't really clean up the dolls or attempt to fix them, but he rather put them up with missing eyes and limbs, covered in dirt, and generally in whatever ramshackle ramshackle state he found them in. Even when dolls arrived in good shape, the wind and weather turned them into cracked and distorted versions of themselves. Don also kept his cabin filled with the dolls, which he dressed in headdresses, sunglasses, and other various accessories. Despite the fact that most people found the island frightening, Don saw the dolls as beautiful protectors, and he welcomed visitors, whom he would, show around, charging a small fee for taking photos. In 2001, Don Santana was found drowned in the same area in which he believed that small child had passed away. According to legend, the dolls in the island are haunted by the spirits of the dead girl, and perhaps even by Don himself. Okay, who wants to go on a road trip with me? Anyone?
Oh, thanks.
In fourth place, we have Pripyat, Ukraine. So Pripyat is an abandoned city in northern Ukraine located near the border with Belarus. Named after the nearby river of the same name, it was founded on February 4th of 1970 as the 9th Atomgrad, which was a type of closed town in the Soviet Union to serve the nearby Chernobyl nuclear power plant, which was located in the adjacent ghost city of Chernobyl. So Pripyat was officially proclaimed a city in 1979 and had grown to a population of around 49,000 by the time it was evacuated on the afternoon of April 27th of 1986, one day after the Chernobyl disaster, making it younger as a city at that time than I am now. Although it was located within the administrative district of Ivankiv Rayon, the abandoned municipality now has a status of City of Regional Significance within the larger Kyiv Oblast and is administered directly from the capital of Kyiv. Pripyat is also supervised by the State Emergency Service of Ukraine, which manages activities for the entire Chernobyl exclusion zone. So following the 1986 Chernobyl nuclear disaster, the entire population of Pripyat was moved to the purpose-built city of Slavutich. At the time of the evacuation, the average age of residents was about 26 years old, and the city housed 13,414 apartments in 160 apartment blocks, with 18 halls of residence accommodating up to, let's say, 7,600 single males or females, and 8 halls of residence for married couples. In terms of education, there were 15 kindergartens and elementary schools for 4,980 children, each with their own nickname, and 5 secondary schools for about 6,000 students. In 2019, it was announced that folks could start visiting the affected areas if certain health and safety procedures were followed, but I don't feel like visiting a radiation-affected city is high up on my bucket list at this point in time. In third place, time to visit the Bodie State Historic Park. So formerly a genuine gold mining town, located east of the Sierra Nevada mountain range in Mono County, California, and now a national landmark, it is known as one of the best preserved ghost towns in the world. It is named after W.S. Bodie, first name unknown, but rumored to be either William or Waterman, who discovered gold in 1859 in an area now known as Brody Bluff. He tragically passed in a snowstorm that same winter and was never present for what came to be. According to pioneer Judge McClinton, the district's name was changed from the proper spelling of B-O-D-E-Y to B-O-D-Y, and then a few other phonetic variations to eventually B-O-D-I-E, after a painter in the nearby boomtown of Aurora lettered a sign as such. An accidental typo that stuck through history, which is a good reminder to proofread your work. I don't do it enough. While the output from the mine is largely insignificant in terms of mining history, the violence and early endings to lives tell a different story. And a particularly harsh winter between 1878 and 79 claimed hundreds of lives, with many others perishing from falling timbers and explosions underground. So Bodie as a town grew to have a reputation for violence and lawlessness, and unlike other mining camps at the time, killings were daily events. Robberies, stage holdups, and fights happened at such a frequency that no complete record could be kept. Reverend F.M. Warrington would describe the area in 1881 as a sea of sin, lashed by the tempests of lust and passion. The first of 4 mysterious fires tore through the business district in 1892, the next destroying the town mill in 1912, and another destroying the same mill again in 1898. The last of the unknown fires demolished most of what was left of the now ghost town in 1932, taking many lives way too soon in the process. So when the last producing mine shut down after 1945, very few people were left living in what was left of the town, and all eventually met untimely ends. One man shot his wife unprompted, and 3 other men from the town took it upon themselves to take his life for that act. So according to historians, the ghost of that man would visit the 3 men after his passing, shaking his fist and appearing as if he was cursing them out. Those men soon died of mysterious diseases and illnesses. Visitors to the area have reported meeting spirits that leave them feeling suffocated, seeing doors open and close on their own, and rocking chairs that may or may not have a menacing older lady staring them down, or even the empty chair rocking on its own. Though Bodie might be a bit of a tourist destination nowadays, but if you remove anything from the land, I'm talking like a pebble, you'll be cursed with remorse and tragedy. The park keeps a logbook of all letters and items returned to them, with each thief writing an apology note to Bodie for what was taken. The curse is upheld by the ghosts of residents past who guard against thieves and protect the town's treasures. Okay, so kleptos, steer clear, or be cursed.
Coming in at number 3, we've got the New Bedford Orpheum. Abandoned theaters are cursed as a rule. Like, name one abandoned theater that doesn't have a ghost or urban legend attached. Oh wait, they're magnets for drama, it's in their nature. And this Massachusetts-based art house has a flair for the dramatic like no other. Get this, it opened on the same day that the Titanic went down. Talk about a hot start. It operated for a few decades, showing movies and hosting cultural events. The Orpheum was a staple of local culture at the time. However, in 1958, it closed its doors. Not for good, mind you. It would still open on occasion for extra special events and was even used by a tobacco company as storage for a little while. But these days, the Orpheum is still and silent. Ghostly, even. A peek inside will reveal a gigantic, sprawling space, complete with mezzanine, private boxes, and faded murals. The peeling paint and crumbling plaster add to the spooky ambiance. A total lack of audience for ages makes for an echoey good time, too. It's everything an old theater should be, including the creepiness. It's decrepit without being condemnable, which has led the community to rally behind efforts to reopen it. However, none of these have been very successful. It seems like the curse extends out, hitting the folks who would even attempt to resurrect it. Would you take a seat in the audience, or are you scared of seeing an unscheduled show? Coming in at number 2, we've got the Sathorn Unique Building. A monument to what could have been, the Sathorn Unique Building is an interesting case. What was supposed to be a luxurious, high-rise apartment building ended up being an abandoned husk. Perfect for urban explorers. Back in the 90s, a magnificent tower was planned. It was to be 47 stories tall with over 600 units housing all sorts of high rollers in Bangkok. Unfortunately, construction had to stop during the 1997 Asian financial crisis. The building itself was about 80% done, but would never be finished in its entirety. Plenty of money, materials, and man-hours were sunk with nothing to show for it. Well, almost nothing. These days, the Sathorn Unique is known as the Ghost Tower. Thrill seekers and graffiti artists love the sprawling building and have pretty much made it their own. The inside is totally filled with spray-painted murals and other forms of street art. Sure, it's dangerous to go running around in abandoned buildings, but try telling that to any of the folks who do it. Aside from the generally unsavory reputation of street art and urban exploring, why is it known as the Ghost Tower? Well, some locals believe the building was built on the site of an ancient graveyard. This unfortunate placement led to construction delays, accidents, and the eventual abandonment. This story is enough to keep anyone but the bravest out of the Ghost Tower. Another theory is that the building cast shadows on the nearby Wat Yad Nawa, an old Buddhist temple. This, while not being worthy of an outright curse, was considered to be unfavorable. Success is hard to achieve while preventing sunlight from reaching Buddhist temples. Recently, the building has achieved some sort of online fame, with many viral videos featuring folks free-running throughout the tower. This resulted in criminal charges being filed against the trespassing videographers. Is that the result of bad luck or a curse? And finally, at number 1, we've got Eastern State Penitentiary. In East Philadelphia, thrown in a cage, ghosts are coming back because they feel the rage. I'll stop there, you get the idea. At one point, this prison was among the most famous worldwide. It jailed some of America's most prolific criminals, including Al Capone, the inspiration for Scarface, and Slick Willie Sutton, the bank robber extraordinaire. Abandoned prisons are absolutely chock full of phantoms and spirits, and why wouldn't they be? The folks there are probably the most discontent and anger-filled of them all. Eastern State takes full advantage of this too. While the prison itself is no longer operational and houses no inmates, well, no living inmates, they still bring fearless folks around on night tours of the facilities. On clear nights, you can even see moonlight shining through these skylights. In addition to the ghosts of prisoners, it's also said that a colony of cats used to live inside the prison. At some point, they were all captured and neutered, leaving them to die off within the walls. An adept eye might just catch the shadow of a ghost cat slinking about in the halls.
Number 5, Eastern State Penitentiary. Starting off the list is Eastern State Penitentiary. It was a prison built in Philadelphia that wanted to stand out from the rest of the American penal system, trying out a new method of punishment called the Pennsylvania system. Well, do tell, what is the Pennsylvania system? It's not pleasant and has absolutely nothing to do with cheesesteaks. The Pennsylvania system refers to imposing the prisoners to solitary confinement all of the time, 24/7. The prisoners lived alone, ate alone, exercised alone, and were only ever allowed to interact with prison guards. When they were being transported or moved around the prison, the guards would make them don black hoods. Guess it's not nearly as sunny in Philadelphia as Frank Reynolds would have you believe. Now this might not surprise you, but this was not a terribly popular system with inmates. The miserable conditions made the inmates' lives horrendous, but the prison didn't care too much. The system only ended up collapsing in 1913 due to overcrowding in the prison. But Eastern State didn't let this stop them from acting sadistically, and really if anything just inspired them to get a little more creative. Prisoners would have their tongues chained to their wrists, unruly troublesome prisoners would be chained to chairs for days on end, they would douse prisoners in freezing cold water, and perhaps worst of all, would trap prisoners into a pit they affectionately nicknamed the Hole, where they'd be kept in the darkness for weeks on end. I'm really not sure if that's any better than the original system. In 1970, after decades of terrorizing its inmates, Eastern State let the last of its inmates free and closed the gates permanently, only to crack them back open a little bit as a tourist location, reopening its walls as a haunted attraction. Due to its horrific history and ominous atmosphere, the prison was rebranded as a haunt, with legends saying that you'll hear all kinds of disembodied laughter, screaming and crying, ghostly figures, shadows moving across the wall, and unexplained footsteps. And if you're looking for more scary stories about prisons or really about anything, then you're at exactly the right place. Stay subscribed to Top 5 Scary for more new scary videos every day. Number 4. Ohio State Reformatory. Ohio State is the picture of a perfect prison. I mean, literally, it was the set for the Shawshank Redemption, so it's kind of a big deal in the prison world. The prison first opened its gates in 1890 and was initially an intermediate penitentiary, a facility for first-time offenders who were deemed too violent to be in other prisons. The inmates were taught basic trades for release and reintegration. However, the prison population started to swell too much by the 20th century, and the reformatory was forced to accept inmates convicted of serious crimes. While day-to-day operations weren't too terribly out of the norm for any other prison, one event in the 1930s may have contributed greatly to the paranormal rumors surrounding it. In the late 1930s, a riot broke out in the East Cell Block, and as punishment, the guards rounded up 120 rioters to share 12 solitary confinement cells together for a week without any food or water. Obviously, this led to multiple prisoners passing away, and even more being broken down to the point of madness. Just outside the prison stands 215 numbered graves, a monument to all the horror that the prison had experienced over the years. Since then, the prison itself has reformed, rehabilitating itself much like Eastern State as a haunted house. Visitors and tour guides who walk through Ohio State report feeling inexplicable chills while walking through the prison's walls. Witnesses say they hear cell doors slam and see dark figures. Those brave enough are welcome to take the prison's tour and attempt to track down spirits of their own, or if you're feeling particularly festive for the Halloween season, you can try the Haunted Prison Experience, a guided tour replete with animatronics and actors for that haunted house feel. Number 3. Missouri State Penitentiary. Once dubbed the bloodiest 47 acres in America, it is no surprise at all that Missouri State Pen is home to all kinds of rumors to be haunted by the souls of its former inmates. The prison was nicknamed The Walls, and shortly after its construction was already home to 2,000 inmates, doubling that size in the progressing years. The prison was home to several riots and escape attempts, with the most infamous attempt occurring in 1954, when some 2,500 inmates participated in a massive day-long riot. 4 buildings burned and the National Guard was called in. Shockingly, out of this, only 4 inmates were fatally injured during this event, and none managed to escape, lending to the prison's hard reputation. Now, the prison has always been reported to be haunted, even during its operation, with both guards and inmates during its service claiming to see spectral apparitions. Most of the ghost stories come out of the prison's oldest building, the A building, home to some of the crueler punishments, including an underground room called the Dungeon, a dank, hostile basement with a low ceiling forcing prisoners into a subservient position where the only light that could be observed was a slit through the door. Modern visitors to the dungeon complain of the disgusting odor of bodies that's pungent, and they feel like they're being watched. Disembodied voices have even been picked up by EVP monitors while wandering through the dungeon. In the control room, visitors report occasionally seeing a spirit called Fast Jack, a medical practitioner from the prison's operating days, who can be seen appearing as a ghastly figure holding a clipboard and a white lab coat, frantically scurrying around the control room, trying to carry out some duty from when he was alive, slamming lockers and opening opening doors. Several ghost hunting groups over the years have investigated the Missouri State Pen, including legendary ghost hunting hero Zach Baggins and the Ghost Adventures crew, finding mysterious voices and what looked like shadow people wandering the halls. Although the bloodiest 47 acres in America might have dried up and the walls are now open to the public, for the inmates who are still impounded there, it's as terrifying as ever.
Number 2 on this list is Pripyat Amusement Park. Pripyat is a town that we've talked a lot about on this channel already. In fact, it was recently featured in a video where we looked at the top 5 mysterious towns that are completely abandoned. Pripyat is a ghost town in northern Ukraine near the Ukrainian and Belarus border. It was named after the nearby river Pripyat and was founded in 1970. Right in the town is a small amusement park that once looked quite fun and had plans to grow into a big Ukrainian park that people might flock to. Those dreams were never realized though, and now it sits in complete and utter disarray. Those dreams were never realized because of the horrible accident that occurred in 1986. You see, the town of Pripyat was basically established to serve the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. When it was first built, it was a closed town basically only for the workers of this place, but it grew and grew as time went on, and at its height had a population of just under 50,000 people. I don't need to go into too much detail about the accident as a whole, because I imagine that you guys are all pretty aware. But basically, this was the worst accident of this nature in human history, and for all our sakes, we need to hope that it never happens again. The radiation damage was absolutely massive, and right after it happened, the entire town of Pripyat had to be evacuated. That, of course, has left the amusement park, right in the middle of this town, completely abandoned as well. Not a lot of people have gone to this town or park since this incident occurred. For a long time, it wasn't safe to set foot within a set radius of the blast. Those who have been brave or foolish enough to set foot into this town and explore the amusement park have reported some strange and scary findings. Rumor has it that some sort of entity lives there. Something dark and evil calling this abandoned place home. A nasty and sinister entity that doesn't like to be disturbed. There have been talks of this being some type of shadow creature or potentially a beast like a werewolf of sorts. Either way, the people who visit this place feel an overwhelming sense of dread when they're there. They also feel as if they're unwelcome, like they entered somebody's home who doesn't want them there. There are multiple reasons why this amusement park is abandoned, so I'd stay away if I was you. And finally, number 1 on this list is Six Flags. Now, I don't mean Six Flags as a chain or anything like that. There's 23 different Six Flags in the United States and not all of them are haunted. One in particular though is currently out of commission, abandoned, and definitely a spot you shouldn't go to. All the Rooms writes, this Six Flags fell out of business following serious damage from Hurricane Katrina in 2005. The park opened in 2000 and was only operating for a few years before suffering significantly during the hurricane, which displaced 20,000 people and killed nearly 2,000 people. The park closed after Hurricane Katrina and there wasn't enough funding for repairs, so it fell into further decay over the last few years. To this day, there's still an eerie sign at the entrance of the park that says closed for the storm. It's an apocalyptic site which has been taken advantage of by Hollywood and used for films such as Jurassic World and Dawn of Planet of the Apes. These filmmakers are way braver than I would be because I would not want to be setting foot on those grounds. The people who have been here all seem to think that something paranormal is going on. Phantom noises echoing throughout the park and other random bodiless sounds are heard all the time. Similarly to a lot of the other things on this list, there is a massive overhanging feeling of dread. The air is thick with it and you can almost taste the discomfort. No one has reported being attacked here, but it seems like that's only a matter of time if people keep going. The mayor of New Orleans is currently looking at demolishing this park, which, in my opinion, probably for the best. Number 5 on this list is the Philadelphia State Hospital. This place is abandoned now, and based on the atrocities that happened here, that's for good reason. All That's Interesting says, in the early 20th century, abuse against patients in these mental asylums was rampant, but few places were as violent as the Philadelphia State Hospital at Byberry, where multiple homicides were later uncovered. The facility opened in 1903 as a working farm for the mentally ill, and patients from other overcrowded mental health hospitals were sent there to heal. But the humble treatment facility quickly became overcrowded itself and was expanded into a multi-campus hospital. In 1919, 2 orderlies confessed to strangling a patient until his eyes popped out and then blamed their actions on PTSD from World War I. Despite their confession, the 2 orderlies were kept on staff and even given a pay raise. And this violence continued for years. In 1989, a groundskeeper stumbled upon the corpses of at least 2 other patients. Violence between patients was just as common. At least one staffer reported witnessing a patient stabbing another patient with a sharpened spoon in 1944. Unethical medical practices were also reportedly carried out in the now abandoned asylum. The pharmaceutical company Smith, Kline and French owned a lab at the hospital where they allegedly conducted questionable testing on patients, likely without their consent. They had people working here who literally murdered one of the patients, and instead of doing anything about it, they just gave them a raise. These were different times back then, folks, and this asylum saw all the bad parts of this era. This murder happened all the way back in 1919, and this hospital kept running like this all the way until 1990. 1990 isn't that long ago, guys. We are only a few decades removed from this horrible institution operating. And the crazy part about all of this is that a place like this is meant to help people. What a joke that ended up being. Number 4 on this list is the Beechworth Asylum. This asylum has definitely been talked about on this channel before in relation to haunted asylums. All That's Interesting says, in October 1867, the sprawling Beechworth Lunatic Asylum was opened in Australia. The facility was built on a hill due to the erroneous belief at the time that high altitude could cleanse patients of their mental illnesses. As was typical of early institutions, the abandoned asylum took in a massive number of patients. At its peak, it housed about 1,200 patients and employed 700 staff members. Also, like most facilities of the 19th century, the treatments at Beechworth were notoriously violent. Doctors subjected patients to straitjackets and shackles. Electroshock treatments were common practice there, so much so that they were reportedly mass shock sessions where nearly the entire patient population was shocked simultaneously. Given the extent of the mistreatment that took place at the asylum, it may not come as a surprise that the facility, which was finally closed in 1995, is said to be extremely haunted. Those who worked at the hospital during its last years alleged that the hauntings began long before the hospital was shuttered. The most famous ghost who's seen these days is Matron Sharp. She was said to watch over the patients as they were shocked by the other nurses and doctors. If you ever saw her coming to your room, then there was a good chance the shock therapy was coming for you next. Now you can sense her due to a dramatic cold presence that fills the room. Number 3 on this list is the Riverview Hospital. This hospital is located in British Columbia and was still operating and doing some horrible practices way longer than anyone would care to admit. It was first built in the early 1900s in a less populated part of BC. It had almost 250 acres of land to itself and a bunch of different buildings that served various purposes. There was one building called the West Lawn Pavilion, which actually was said to house the most disturbed male patients in the whole country. This part of the hospital eventually shut down in 1983, but the rest of the place, where a bunch of questionable practices were going down, that didn't shut down until 2010. That's right, guys. 2010. Literally only 12 years ago, this place was still operating. Reports revealed that the hospital still employed electroshock therapy in the 21st century and allegedly illegally sterilized a number of patients. In 2005, 9 women received settlements totaling $450,000 following a joint lawsuit filed against the facility over the alleged sterilizations. As much as I want so badly to believe that we are out of this era of poor mental health, we might not fully be. That happened just over a decade ago. If you were sent to this place only a few years prior, then you may have had to deal with this. Kind of makes you wonder how many other places around the world are still conducting horrible treatments that we don't know about.
Number 5. Whittingham Hospital, England. Whittingham Hospital, located in England, is notorious for its spine-chilling reputation as one of the most haunted places within the United Kingdom. This branching psychiatric facility was originally founded in 1869 as the Whittingham Asylum. The hospital is riddled with a long and dark history that continues to intrigue the curious minds of paranormal enthusiasts, dark tourists, and even just casual onlookers. The hospital was meant to be a place of hope, where those suffering from mental illnesses could seek treatment and solace. But over the years, Whittingham Hospital's reputation took a dark turn. Substantiated claims of overcrowding, inadequate care, and the mistreatment of struggling patients began to surface, casting a dark shadow over the institution. As the hospital's population inflated, the claims and stories of its dark side only grew. One of the most haunting aspects of Whittingham Hospital comes from its now abandoned state. The facility officially closed its doors in 1995. The large complex consists of many interconnected buildings, all of which are said to be riddled with bouts of paranormal activity. It's not uncommon for curious visitors to report odd encounters, strange noises, and unexplained phenomena within the hospital's halls. One of the most famous ghostly entities said to roam the hospital is that of a nurse known as Nurse Edith. According to legend, Nurse Edith was deeply committed to her patients and worked tirelessly during her time at Whittingham. Some believe that her spirit lingers in the hospital, continuing to care for the patients who suffered there, even in their afterlives. Aw, that's kind of sweet. Visitors have reported hearing the sound of airy footsteps and the rustling of a nurse's uniform, even though the building is completely void of the living. Another ghost associated with Whittingham Hospital is the Lady in White, and guys, I'm starting to think that this Lady in White is actually just everywhere, because I swear to the heavens almighty that she has appeared in every single ghost video I've done. Is she like a ghost celebrity? Is she going on a world tour? Are people just really not creative and the only name they can think of is the lady and a vague descriptive feature? What would I be called? The lady with curls? Sorry, anyway. The Lady in White. This Lady in White is described as a spectral woman dressed in a flowing white gown. Well, I would assume so. She's often seen wandering the hospital's halls, her presence accompanied by an eerie chill and an overwhelming sense of dread. Some speculate that she may have been a former patient or a nurse from this hospital's dark past. What nurse was going to work in a long, flowy dress? The hospital's small chapel is another location that is thought to be haunted. It's always the chapel, isn't it? Witnesses have reported hearing faint whispers, disembodied voices, and the sound of organ music emanating from the chapel, even though it hasn't been used for decades. Well, not by the living at least. The atmosphere in this abandoned place is incredibly uncomfortable and haunting. It's not surprising in the slightest that many believe the spirits of the past still linger within its walls. Number 4. Essex County Hospital. Essex County Hospital is a medical facility in the heart of Essex County, but it has definitely gained popularity for more than just its dark medical practices. This now abandoned hospital has become the subject of numerous ghost stories and paranormal legends, earning it a reputation as one of the most haunted asylums in the region. The hospital's strange history began in the late 1800s when it was first founded as a state-of-the-art mental health institution. Over the years, it grew to care for a wide range of patients, from the mentally ill to those with severe physical medical conditions. However, it is the alleged treatment of the mentally ill patients that left a sinister imprint on this building's hallowed halls. Many claims of paranormal sightings in Essex County Hospital revolve around the abandoned psychiatric wards. Former staff members and visitors claim to hear disembodied voices, eerie whispers, and the sounds of footsteps echoing boldly through the empty hallways. Some witnesses have even reported shadowy figures moving about, only to vanish into thin air when approached. These strange entities are thought to be tormented souls, leading some to believe that the hospital's troubled history has left broken, lingering spirits behind. One of the most chilling stories surrounds a former nurse who is said to still roam the hospital's near-empty corridors. It's said that she was driven to madness by the relentless demands of her job and eventually took her own life during one of her regular shifts. Visitors and paranormal investigators have even reported encountering her ghostly figure, dressed in an old nurse's uniform, wandering aimlessly and emitting an energy plagued by sorrow. The morgue of the hospital is another area where paranormal activity is frequently reported. Witnesses have claimed to hear strange, unexplained noises and have also felt sudden drops in temperatures. Some have even reported seeing figures of patients who passed away within the hospital's walls wandering around. Essex County Hospital's notoriety has attracted paranormal investigators from everywhere. Many have conducted extensive research within the building, managing to capture unexplained phenomena on audio and video recordings. Legends Legends and ghost stories have only intensified the hospital's supernatural reputation. Residents avoid the area at night, and honestly, props to them, they're smart. Don't walk near the creepy abandoned hospital filled with scorned creatures alone at night. Night is when the bad things happen. Night is when there is definitely something chasing you as you run up the stairs after turning off the light. Skeptics often scoff at the claims of ghostly encounters, but the giant volume of reported paranormal activity can't be ignored. Whether you're a plain-minded skeptic or a curious believer in the supernatural, the stories surrounding this abandoned hospital continue to intrigue anyone who hears its unsettling story.
In second place, we have the island of Poveglia. Yep, another entire abandoned island. This one's a little creepier though. So the island is located in the lagoon near Venice and is famous for being one of the most haunted places in Italy. Tourists and locals alike are banned from the island, which was used for centuries as a place to exile the sick to prevent the spread of disease and contain the mentally ill in an asylum built in the late 1800s. Yes, I'll backtrack and elaborate. So in 1348, the bubonic plague arrived in Venice and Poveglia, like many other small islands at the time, and it became a quarantine colony. The plague on average killed like 1 out of 3 Europeans, by the way. So fearing the unbridled spread of the disease, Venice exiled many of its symptom-bearing citizens there. So at the island center, the dead and those too sick to protest were burned on giant pyres. So this included the tens of thousands of Venice citizens just dying on the mainland. Those fires would burn once more in 1630 when the Black Death again swept through the city. The small island was used as a mass burial ground, and ashes from human remains make up as much as 50% of the island's soil. Cripes, I hope it's a good fertilizer. The deaths of nearly 160,000 people on the island have given it its nickname, the Island of Ghosts. A doctor at the asylum was known to have experimented on patients with crude lobotomies and jumped from the bell tower in the late 1930s after claiming he had been driven mad by ghosts. Decades later, nearby residents claimed to still hear the bell, although it was removed many years earlier. A report titled Haunted History states that some restoration work had started in recent history, but abruptly stopped without explanation. Okay, maybe this is one spot on today's list that I might not want to visit. And in first place, we have St. Elmo in Colorado. St. Elmo is a ghost town and allegedly the best preserved ghost town in all of Colorado, while also boasting the most hauntings and paranormal activity of any ghost town in the state. The town was a major gold and silver trading center and hub of life for many pioneers, outlaws, and miners for decades. So it was originally called Forest City, but St. Elmo was settled in 1878 and became an official township in 1880 with the arrival of the first post office. So the residents of the town were forced to change the name because there were already too many forest cities in the area. So gotta applaud the originality. St. Elmo went through a massive gold rush, reaching the height of its population of 2,000 residents in only 10 days. The majority of the town worked in one of the 4 local mines. The Mary Murphy mine was the most profitable mine and the longest operating, having produced over $60 million worth of gold while it was in operation. When the mines began to close down, the town began to dwindle. The Mary Murphy mine continued to operate until 1922, but was shut down when the railroad was abandoned. Postal service was discontinued in 1952 after the death of St. Elmo's postmaster. Now for the fun part, ghost stories. I saved the best for last for a reason. The most famous ghost of St. Elmo is Annabelle Dirty Annie Stark, not to be confused with the beloved Annabelle doll. This Annabelle is the descendant of Anton and Anna Stark, who arrived in St. Elmo with the Pacific Railroad in 1881. Anton was a section boss in the mines, while Anna ran the Home Comfort Hotel located on Poplar Street and the general store. Oh, and both structures are still standing today. Anna Stark was known as a cruel and harsh woman who never allowed her 3 children, Roy, Tony, and Annabelle, out in the town to mingle or work alongside what she deemed the simple town folk. Annabelle grew up attractive and passionate for the town, and her love of St. Elmo was fierce. After the death of her mother, Annabelle and Tony inherited the hotel, and the once impeccably clean establishment fell to shambles. So along with the decline of the town, Annabelle began to lose her grasp on reality. The town soon called her Dirty Annie because she would emerge in filthy clothing and her hair was in a tangled mess all the time. Finally, free of the harsh rule of her mother, most people assumed this was her quiet rebellion. Residents remember strolling the main street with her firearm loaded and hung over one shoulder, ready to protect the town from anyone who dared to threaten it. Since her death, it is told she can still be found roaming the streets. Only a short while after Annabelle had passed away, the hotel was left to a family friend whose grandchildren were playing inside the hotel, when suddenly all of the doors slammed shut and the temperature dropped 20 degrees. The children cried and screamed, and finally the room returned to the outside temperature, and the door slowly swung open. Oh, that's not the only ghost story. Don't worry. A woman skiing down Poplar Street at dusk was struck by a peculiar sight of a lovely-looking woman in a long white gown glaring out of the second-story window of the Home Comfort Hotel. Now, the skier was shocked. She knew the owner of the hotel was on vacation, and nobody was supposed to be inside. As she turned to see what the woman was eyeing, she noticed snowmobiles approaching. So, sidebar, snowmobiling is illegal in St. Elmo. So the skier went and advised the group, who promptly apologized and went back where they came from. When she turned back to look at the hotel, the woman in the window was still watching, and she lowered her head, nodded at the skier, turned and vanished before her eyes. So curious and in disbelief, the skier went back the next day to find every window and door were locked. When the owner of the hotel returned, the two women searched the property with nothing to be found. So was it Annabelle keeping watch? Be sure to let me know in the comments what you think.
Number 5. The John Zaffis Museum. For someone like John Zaffis, opening a haunted museum was always in the cards. It was practically destiny. Few people can claim to come from a legacy of haunted museums, but Zaffis can, since he's the nephew of Ed and Lorraine Warren, America's most famous and oftentimes controversial demonologists. Growing up with a large fondness for his aunt and uncle's work, Zaffis developed a love of the paranormal from an early age and saw fit to try and carry on his relatives' work after their passing, opening his own collection of haunted relics the same way that the Warrens did. And what a collection of weird relics Zaffis has picked up. I'll shout out a couple of the cooler ones. The highlight for me has got to be this sword that was used to conjure black magic, and the sword is in like all of the promotional imagery, so it's gotta be pretty good. Check out this photo of Zaffis where he looks like a dark wizard who's also a fantasy author. Among the blade are things like a cast iron skull that was used in occult rituals, plenty of haunted dolls and idols, an ornate elk skull thought to be used in something evil, and loads more. Zaffis does point out on the website, in the frequently asked questions section, not to worry too much about being exposed to this stuff, as everything that's brought into the collection is blessed before taking residence. Although they do make a small warning on the website that there is a teeny tiny small chance that any residual evil might attach to you in the museum. So, I don't know, make sure to wash your hands with hand sanitizer or holy water on the way out. I can't not include this, by the way, but the website also states that if Zaffis believes personally that any of the items in the museum have become too evil or too haunted to remain safe for public display, he throws it into an unspecified body of water. So if you're looking to start a collection of slightly used haunted relics on the cheap, I'd just check out the surrounding bodies of water to the museum. Now unfortunately, John Zaffis' museum is currently closed. Hey, this list was about ones that had to be abandoned, right? Can't come as too much of a surprise. But for those who are hoping to get a good up-close personal look at these cursed relics, Zaffis says he's been searching for a new location for the collection. Hopefully somewhere with some good ventilation, you know, really let all that evil air flow. And hey, if you're looking for more videos about haunted museums, haunted objects, haunted dolls, haunted everything really, we've got all more of that in spades. So stay subscribed to Top 5 Scary, keep the screams coming all night long. Let's keep going. Number 4. The Museum of Medieval Torture Instruments. Pack up the whole family and make sure to stop by at the gift shop for the Museum of Medieval Torture Instruments. Don't worry, there's something for everybody here to enjoy. Make sure you take home the miniature guillotine. One quick look at their website is particularly illuminating. Our main product is emotion, boldly proclaimed as their slogan. Yeah, well, agonizing pain is definitely an emotion, so I can't disagree there. The Museum of Medieval Torture Instruments really is exactly what it says on the tin. It's a massive collection of real historical relics and replicas serving to highlight some of the most disgustingly creative works of engineering ever invented. The kind of stuff that would make Jigsaw and his funny little puppet blush with anticipation. The museum's goal is to remind us just how truly unimaginably cruel human beings are capable of being to each other, and the lengths to which we will go to attain such horrid ambitions. The phrase, "those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it," comes up a whole lot on the museum's frequently asked questions page on the website, which is good. So come, learn a bit from such classics like the Rack or the Brazen Bull, so you don't accidentally end up repeating those. I don't think I can even possibly describe what either of those horrifying things do without getting this channel permanently flagged. So if you're curious, maybe take the worst Google trip of your life, or go up and visit the Museum of Medieval Torture Instruments. They've got locations all over the states for your pleasure, and there's even one in Europe, but I'm pretty sure that's a different one. The one I'm talking about right now is the American one. The one in Chicago even offers a ghost hunting tour, as some guests believe there are residual spirits tied to some of the more grisly equipment kept in the dungeons. Guests are invited to spend the night on their own accord or with the safety of a tour guide to try and uncover any of the spirits that are said to be still living there, including an old executioner named Thomas who loves his work so much he just never left. Sheesh. Nearly 1,000 years and he still doesn't take a day off. Some people just love to have their nose to the grindstone, or to forcefully shove someone else's face into the grindstone, to each their own.
Number 5, Chernobyl. I've made the executive decision to kick off today with the most obvious location. For those who might not be aware of the horrors of Chernobyl, allow me to start today off with a mini sad history lesson. So the disaster was a nuclear accident that occurred on the 26th of April of 1986 at the number 4 reactor in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant near the city of Pripyat. It is one of only 2 nuclear energy accidents rated at 7, which is the maximum severity on the International Nuclear Event Scale, the other being the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan. The meltdown and explosions ruptured the reactor core. And destroyed the reactor building. So this was immediately followed by an open-air reactor core fire, which lasted until May 4th of 1986, during which airborne radioactive contaminants were released and deposited onto other parts of the USSR and Europe. Approximately 70% landed in Belarus, around 16 kilometers away. The fire released about the same amount of radioactive material as the initial explosion. In response to the initial accident, a 10-kilometer radius exclusion zone was created 36 hours after the accident, from which approximately 49,000 people were evacuated, primarily from Pripyat. The exclusion zone was later increased to a radius of 30 kilometers, from which an additional 68,000 people were evacuated. Following the disaster, Pripyat was abandoned and eventually replaced by the new purpose-built city of Xunantunich. In July of 2019, the Ukrainian president announced that the Chernobyl site would become an official tourist attraction. Immunology experts recommend that tourists wear clothes and shoes they are comfortable with throwing away, avoid plant life, especially the depths of the forest due to the high levels of radiation. Oh, why? Oh, just because the areas were not cleaned in the aftermath of the disaster and remain highly contaminated. Research showed that fungus, moss, and mushrooms are radioactive. So among the buildings that were abandoned were multiple schools, with the small city having 15 preschools for just under 5,000 attendees. Most of the buildings in the city are practically empty, but not the schools. School books and class magazines were clearly of no value to looters, and city residents were more worried about saving at least something from their personal property, leaving the buildings almost intact, minus the effects of being left empty over time. Moving on to other places of note, the Pripyat amusement park was set to have its grand opening on the 1st of May in 1986, in time for the May Day celebrations, but those plans were cancelled on April 26. Several sources report that the park was opened for a short time on the 27th before the announcement to evacuate the city was made to distract the residents from the unfolding disaster nearby. Constructed under the Soviet Union as a park of culture and rest, typical of many large cities in the then Soviet Union, the amusement park's attractions were manufactured by the firm Attraction, who were responsible for the construction of many of the amusement parks which remain to be seen around the former Soviet Union today in various states of repair. Located northwest to the Palace of Culture in the center of Pripyat, the park had 5 attractions: the iconic 26-meter Ferris wheel titled Circular Overview, the Autodrome bumper cars, a paratrooper ride called Chamomile, Russian swing boats, and also a carnival shooting game. Fun fact, the successor to the original company is still manufacturing the Ferris wheel, paratrooper, and bumper cars with a similar design as of 2017. Radiation levels around the park vary. The liquidators washed radiation into the soil after the helicopters carrying radioactive materials used the grounds as a landing strip, so concrete areas are less radioactive. However, areas where moss is built up can emit levels amongst the highest levels of radiation in the whole area. So the Ferris wheel actually made news in September of 2017 when Polish tourists turned it mechanically for the first time since 1986, later returning it to its original position. As much as it would be fascinating to explore history, I'll wait till it's a little less detrimental to my health. Number 4, the Paris catacombs. Deep underground the city of Paris are hundreds of miles of tunnels in a complex network that is one of the oldest in the world. It's a darker city that few tourists experience due to the high risk of danger. People often get lost. The walls can also collapse at any moment, so many who venture there wear miner's helmets. There's no electricity among the endless winding canals. There's no electricity amongst the endless winding canals, corridors, and crypts filled with mounds of unidentified skulls, which are estimated to be about 6 million deceased Parisians. There are parts so tight that you have to lie on your belly and slither forward like a worm to get through. Only a small section of the catacombs is accessible to tourists, while the rest has been illegal to enter since 1955. Look, I'm not saying you shouldn't explore the tourist accessible areas. Heck, I want to visit those myself, but stay out of the illegal areas. Urban explorers who frequent the catacombs call themselves cataphiles, which which I must admit is a very smart moniker. They paint, sculpt, and create other art, while also building false walls, trapdoors, and secret chutes to keep away the cataflicks or catacops who try to catch them trespassing. You must know a cataphile who can be your guide to even try to explore the unknown, or else risk getting lost or stuck for who knows how long. As much as I love exploring creepy history, the thought of getting lost in such a cursed place is a type of scared I'm not fond of, and don't particularly ever want to experience.
Number 3. The Penang War Museum. I think it's a very good sign that your museum is a friendly, welcoming place. If you Google it and the first results are an article called The Horrors on Ghost Hill, and a listing for an IMDb episode for a series called I Wouldn't Go There, featuring your museum. It's either really hurting or really helping the tourism there. Well, if those warning signs weren't enough to deter you, enter the Penang War Museum, my little ghouls and goblins. It's been described as one of the most haunted spots in Asia, flat out. The Penang Museum is built atop the grave of an old army fort built by the British in the 1930s, but was taken control by the Japanese in the late 30s in World War II, and used to house prisoners for as long as the prisoners lived, which was, usually not very long, if the site of the guillotine is anything to go by. After the end of the Second World War, the place had become totally abandoned, until it was retrofitted to become a museum, and serve as a reminder of the grim reality of war and its costs. The whole place kind of has this eerie, abandoned ghost town vibe as you walk through tunnels and old bunkers, serving to try and replicate what it would be like to actually work and spend time in a place like this while it was functioning. Given the very grim nature of the content and the site itself, which was home to so much bloodshed, death, hatred, and all the worst parts of our souls, it's no surprise that the museum has an infamous reputation as a spot for paranormal activity. Guests have reported seeing strange sightings, unusual shadows, and feeling chills as they walk through the bunkers. But all of this begs the question, would ghosts even be scarier than the actual truth of this place? Now, I've never been, but from what I was looking at and gathering for this, it seems to me like the true horror of the Penang Museum is that it's a reflection of some of the worst parts of the human experience. A reminder of what happens during wartime and what people do to one another. This place doesn't need stories of spirits. It's haunted enough as is by the memories that will forever be tied to it. Number 2. The Mütter Museum. Mutter is the German word for mother. That's your fact for today, so you can tell your Mutter that you learned something from this video. Well, this isn't a museum for moms or about moms, although they're more than welcome to come. The Mütter Museum in Philadelphia isn't quite like the other museums on this list. It's not particularly known for being paranormal or haunted, but rather it's a collection of medical oddities and curios all arranged behind cabinets in a very clean, professional manner. It's not known for vengeful spirits or anything walking the halls, but rather just home to an incredible amount of very creepy things in jars. Every picture of the place looks like something out of a mad scientist's lab, a background of a B horror movie set, that one weird place from that one Harry Potter movie, maybe I'm remembering that wrong. Amputated limbs float in jars next to organs, fetuses from all sorts of animals you can imagine, and more bones than you could possibly shake a femur at. They got skulls of all kinds. They got skulls for days. They got an entire wall dedicated solely to the skulls of criminals, and all sorts of broken skulls in disarray, eaten by tumors or other lovely diseases. If you're looking for skulls, they have got skulls. They've got a collection of famous remnants, Albert Einstein's brain, if you want to see if some of that rubs off on you, Grover Cleveland's famous tumor. Well, we all love Grover Cleveland's tumor. Pack the whole car up. Let's go see that. You know, fun stuff. Now, guests who visit the Mütter Museum do pretty frequently complain of feeling dizzy and uneasy while wandering through the collection, but whether or not that's because of some poltergeist or spiritual influence, or because you're wandering through a 6,000 square foot room looking at hundreds of brains, bones, and disembodied organs in jars, is up for some debate. I know just reading about this thing already makes me feel kind of squeamish, makes my stomach feel all churny. I wonder if they have a little cafe in this one, like most museums have. You think anybody's eating there? And number 1, the Museum of Death. The Museum of Death. Well, I wonder what sort of topics they enjoy covering at the Museum of Death. I bet they have an absolutely illuminating look at pre-Raphaelite art of the late 19th to early 20th centuries. They don't? What? No, at the Museum of Death, opened in Hollywood in 1995, which was opened by a married couple with the intention to make people happy to be alive. Whew. How do they accomplish this? Do they show you pictures of whiskers on kittens and raindrops on roses? No, of course not. It's a collection of everything to do with death. Bones, skulls, coffins, ancient mortician's tools, executioner's equipment, and a whole lot more. Amusingly, the owners have said their goal is not to scare anyone with this museum. That's not what their museum is about. Now sure, they play videos of autopsies and they have footage and imagery from incredibly grisly and stomach-churning real-life true crime cases like artifacts from Charles Manson's family or some of Jeffrey Dahmer's personal effects, but they don't want to scare you. The museum is there to show death in its brutal, unedited honesty. The owners themselves describe it as a commemoration of life. And I gotta be honest, I'm making it sound worse than it is, but it definitely does sound interesting. And the grimmest parts of me are definitely more than a little curious to check it out in that morbid sort of way, because it sounds cool. Probably a great date spot to take a goth girl, I bet. The museum does kind of embrace its sort of twisted reputation and really runs with it. It hosts Black Dahlia costume contests where guests are judged on who's got the best post-mortem Black Dahlia costume, which is something. It's not thought to be as haunted as some of the other places on this list, but it does really bring out some visceral reactions in people. Apparently, it's not too uncommon for guests to demand to leave early or to outright faint while walking through the museum. The owners refer to these cases as falling down ovations, which is a very funny turn of a phrase. Now, sadly, if you're listening to all of this and you're already pre-buying tickets for your next trip to LA, sadly, the museum is currently closed down. They are reopening though. They've also got a museum in New Orleans, since their collection of macabre knickknacks is so large it couldn't be contained to just one spot. When it reopens, I recommend you get out as soon as you can. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
Number 3. Danvers State Hospital. Danvers State Hospital, located in Danvers, Massachusetts, has a twisted and haunted history that has managed to capture the imaginations of paranormal enthusiasts and the curiosity of brave urban explorers. It's considered one of the most well-known and haunted asylums within the United States. Danvers State Hospital was constructed in 1874 and was originally known as the State Lunatic Hospital at Danvers. It was designed by an architect as a sprawling Kirkbride plan institution. This design was highly preferred in the 19th century due to its focus on natural light and, more importantly, patient comfort. However, over time, the hospital faced issues relating to overcrowding, underfunding, and development surrounding the knowledge and treatment of psychiatric care. Danvers State Hospital became notorious for its mistreatment of patients, overcrowding, and unsanitary conditions. Stories of neglect, harm inflicted by staff, and experimental treatments added to its disturbing reputation. The hospital's history is drowned in tragedy. Thousands of patients passed away within its walls over the years. The hospital's architecture, which features a central administration building with wings extending outward, became an iconic silhouette on the Massachusetts landscape. The hospital's ominous appearance also played a role in its association with paranormal activity. By the mid-1900s, changes in the mental health care and treatment thankfully led to the eventual abolishment of Danvers State Hospital. It officially closed its doors in 1992, causing the property to face years of abandonment and nature claim deterioration. Danvers State Hospital's association with the paranormal began to increase dramatically during its years of abandonment. Urban explorers and ghost hunters reported strange interactions and occurrences, including unexplained noises, odd figures, and a general feeling of unease. The hospital's decaying interiors and labyrinth-like layout only further contributed to the sense of doom. In 2005, the administration building was renovated and repurposed into luxury apartments known as the Residences at the Page School. However, the other wings of the hospital were demolished to make way for new things. The history and haunting even inspired a 2001 horror film called Session 9, which was set and actually partially filmed on the real hospital ground. Despite the changes to the property and the demolition of much of the hospital, Danvers State Hospital remains a symbol of the troubling history of mental health care in the US. Number 2. Old Changi Hospital, Singapore. The Old Changi Hospital, located in Singapore, is a haunting relic of the past, notorious for its eerie and unsettling history, like many others here. This abandoned medical facility with its dark past and countless paranormal encounters has become the focus of local legends and a location of paranormal fascination. The hospital was built in the early 1930s and was initially used as a military hospital for British forces. During World War II, it witnessed significant trauma and suffering while it was used as a prisoner of war camp by the Japanese. The hospital's history is tainted by atrocities committed during the Japanese occupation. Many prisoners of war, including Allied soldiers and civilians, suffered unspeakable horrors within its thick walls. Claims of torment, brutality, and death all contribute to the building's dark and unsettling presence. After the war, the Old Changi Hospital continued to serve as a medical facility, but its patients began to experience strange displays of paranormal activity. The stories of the paranormal activity soon began to spread throughout the hospital. Visitors and staff often reported hearing strange noises, disembodied voices, and witnessing oddities from another dimension. Commonly reported encounters include sightings of shadowy figures, the sounds of footsteps in empty corridors, and mysterious unexplained events. One of the most well-known stories associated with the hospital is the Lady in Red. According to the legend, a woman dressed in red is often spotted aimlessly roaming through the hospital's hallways. Some believe that she may be the spirit of a nurse from the hospital's past, forever trapped within its walls. Paranormal investigators and enthusiasts have flocked to to the old Changi Hospital to explore its haunted reputation even further, hoping that they may be fortunate enough to catch even just a glimpse of an unknown entity. Many have managed to capture audio recordings, photographs, and video footage supposedly documenting encounters with spirits or unexplained phenomena. These investigators have even further fueled the already blazing fire of this building's haunted reputation. In recent years, the old Changi Hospital has been featured in various paranormal television shows. The old Changi Hospital's chilling history and reported encounters with the unexplained make it an enduring and eerie landmark in Singapore. Number 1. Penhurst State School and Hospital. Penhurst State School and Hospital, found in Spring City, Pennsylvania, has a sinister history full of allegations surrounding the serious neglect and harmful mistreatment of its residents. This tragic past has given rise to numerous claims of paranormal activity, turning Penhurst into a hotspot for ghost lovers, paranormal investigators, and curious minds. Penhurst was established in 1908, initially intended to be an institution for the care and treatment of individuals with neurodivergent brains and serious mental health impairments. Because anyone who is neurodivergent back then was classified as legally insane. However, over the decades, like many others on this list, the facility became overcrowded, understaffed, and plagued by claims of inhumane treatment towards its patients. Reports of physical and psychological harm, as well as overcrowded and unsanitary conditions, created a lot of controversy and upset in the community. Not enough for them to do anything about it, but in their heads, they were very upset. The mistreatment and neglect of residents at Penhurst eventually led to its closure in 1987, after over 80 years after the doors first opened. The facility was abandoned and left to be forgotten and taken over by nature, but the stories of the cruel suffering endured by its residents did not fade. Instead, these stories contributed to the now well-known reputation that Penhurst has. One of the most known paranormal activity hotspots within Penhurst is the Mayflower Building. This building was once home to some of the institution's most vulnerable residents, who all met grisly, vicious ends. Visitors exploring the abandoned wing have reported hearing looming voices, footsteps, and the sounds of wheelchairs moving on their own. Many believe that the tormented, vengeful spirits of former residents continue to roam the Mayflower Building, unable to find true peace even in death. The Penhurst State School and Hospital is host to regular ghost tours and paranormal investigations, attracting curious individuals from all over the globe. These tours offer enthusiasts a chance to explore the decaying buildings and the chance to potentially encounter one of the restless spirits that inhabit the grounds. While skeptics argue that the stories of paranormal activity at Penhurst can be attributed to the tragic history of the institution and the power of suggestion, many who have visited the site claim to have had inexplicable and chilling experiences.
Number 3, the island of Poveglia. Yep, an entirely abandoned island, and it's got quite the history. So the island is located in the lagoon near Venice, and is famous for being one of the most haunted places in all of Italy. Tourists and locals alike are banned from the island, which was used for centuries as a place to exile the sick, to prevent the spread of disease, and contain the mentally ill in an asylum built in the late 1800s. Yeah, I'll backtrack and elaborate. In 1348, the bubonic plague arrived in Venice and Poveglia, like many other small islands at the time, and it became a quarantine colony. The plague on average killed 1 out of 3 Europeans, so fearing the crazy spread of the disease, Venice exiled many of its symptom-bearing citizens there. Go. At the island center, the dead and those too sick to protest were burned on giant pyres. This included the tens of thousands of Venice citizens dying on the mainland. These fires were burned once more in 1630 when the Black Death again swept through the city. The small island was used as a mass burial ground, and ashes from human remains make up as much as 50% of the island's soil, so I hope it's a good fertilizer. The deaths of nearly 160,000 people on the island have given it its nickname, the Island of Ghosts. A doctor at the asylum was known to have experimented on patients with crude lobotomies and jumped from the bell tower in the 1930s after claiming he'd been driven mad by ghosts. Decades later, nearby residents claimed to still hear the bell, although it was removed many years earlier. A report titled Haunted History states that some restoration work has started in recent history, but abruptly stopped without explanation, so maybe this is one spot on today's list that I don't want to visit, ever. Number 2, Bodie State Historic Park. Formerly a genuine gold mining town located east of the Sierra Nevada mountain range in Mono County, California, and now a national landmark, it is known as one of the best preserved ghost towns in the world. It is named after W.S. Bodie, first name unknown, but rumored to be either William or Waterman, who discovered gold in 1859 in an area now known as Brody Bluff. He tragically passed away in a snowstorm that same winter and was never present for what came to be. According to pioneer Judge McClinton, the district's name was changed from the proper spelling of B-O-D-E-Y to B-O-D-Y, and then a few other phonetic variations to eventually B-O-D-I-E after a painter in the nearby boomtown of Aurora later-day fine as such, an accidental typo that got stuck through history, which is a good reminder to proofread your work. While the output from the mine is largely insignificant in terms of mining history, the violence and early endings to lives tell a different story. A particularly harsh winter between 1878 and 79 claimed hundreds of lives, with many others perishing from falling timber and explosions underground. Bodie as a town grew to have a reputation for violence and lawlessness, and unlike other mining camps at the time, killings were daily events. Robberies, stage holdups, and fights happened at such a frequency that no complete record could be kept. Reverend F.M. Warrington would describe the area in 1881 as a sea of sin, lashed by tempests of lust and passion. The first of 4 mysterious fires tore through the business district in 1892, the next destroying the town mill in 1912, and another destroying the same mill again in 1898. The last of the unknown fires demolished most of what was left of the now ghost town in 1932, taking many lives too soon in the process. When the last producing mine shut down after 1945, very few people were left living in what was left of the town, and all eventually met untimely ends. One man shot his wife unprompted, and 3 other men from the town took it upon themselves to take his life for the act. According to historians, the ghost of that man would visit the 3 men after his passing, shaking his fist and appearing as if he was cursing them out. Those men soon died of mysterious diseases and illnesses. Visitors to the area have reported meeting spirits that leave them feeling suffocated, seeing doors open and close on their own, and rocking chairs that may or may not have a menacing older lady staring them down, or even the empty chair rocking on its own. Nowadays, if you remove anything from the land, even like a little pebble, you'll be cursed with remorse and tragedy. The curse is upheld by the ghosts of residents past, who guard against thieves and protect the town's treasures. So kleptos, steer clear or be cursed. Number 1. Plymouth. The Caribbean island of Montserrat was quite the getaway spot in the 1980s after music producer Sir George Martin opened a recording studio there called Air. The appeal of working with his team and spending a few weeks or months recording in a tropical paradise was so compelling that the world's most famous rock stars, had a good time there. We're talking like Mick Jagger, Elton John, Stevie Wonder, and Paul McCartney all laid down tracks. The party sadly ended abruptly when twin disasters struck the island. Beginning on the 18th of July in 1995, a series of huge eruptions at the South Friar Hills volcano, which had been inactive for centuries, sent pyroclastic flows and ash falls across a wide area of southern Montserrat, including the capital of Plymouth. On the 21st of August in 1995, tephra fell on Plymouth, necessitating an evacuation that lasted until September 3rd. Following renewed volcanic activity on the 1st of December, residents were evacuated for the second time, but were allowed back on the 1st of January. On April 3rd, it was evacuated for the third and final time. The island was divided into risk zones. During some periods, entry into Plymouth was prohibited, and at other times it was allowed during daytime only to those with a means of rapid escape. And the last time that access was legally allowed to the area during daytime was June 16th of 1997, which was right before I was born. On the 25th of June, a further massive eruption produced pyroclastic surges that killed 19 people and reached nearly to the island's airport on the eastern side of the island, which had remained open until that time. Between the 4th to the 8th of August of that year, a further series of large eruptions destroyed approximately 80% of the town, burying it under 1.4 meters of ash. This hot material burned many of the buildings, making habitation nearly impossible for many of the residents. The flows, lava, ash, and other volcanic rock types were mostly compact, having a density similar to that of concrete. The removal of the overburden would have required the use of explosives, bulldozers, and other resources way too expensive for all of this. It was anticipated that the soil underneath the hardened mud and lava would have been scorched and left completely non-arable by the intense heat of the pyroclastic flows. The entire south half of the island was declared an exclusion zone because of the continuing volcanic activity at the hills. So the government of the island was moved north to the town of Brady's, although Plymouth still remains the technical capital. Recently, Montserrat has begun chaperoning driving tours into the exclusion zone, where visitors can walk through the ruins of the former capital, which now lies buried under some 20 feet of ash and stone, where the smoking volcano still pumps over 350 tons of sulfur dioxide into the sky every day. During a tour, one sees modern concrete buildings shattered by the unbelievable force of nature. Over 10 feet of ash and mud have buried so much of the city that in certain areas only rooftops poke up from the dust. We're talking like papers and envelopes are stacked on desktop piles of work, which were made pointless by the pile of ash that fills up the floor and outside balconies. 19 people died from breaking the law and entering the exclusion zone before it was safe, by the way. The hot gas cooked their lungs, and they looked similar to mummies when they were eventually found. Yeah, big pass from me.